need you more. get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
To the Knights of Last Call. You can't hear me. Anyways, welcome everybody. I saw that. Unfortunately, the Focusrite collection. Yes, Derek with the hat. I'm rocking. I just got this in the mail today. I didn't know. I didn't order this, so I can only assume that either Stephen Glicker ordered this for me or Sammy Glicker sent it to me, or it's just part of signing up for Dungeons and Cabins, Satan's Game.
Dungeons and Dragons, Satan's Game.
So no, I'm not going to rock the hat the whole time, but it is my Dungeons and Cabins hat. So for my summer camp, D&D summer camp that I was conned into going to. Get it? Con? Anyways, welcome everybody to Night's Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, and tonight, we believe it or not, this channel doesn't just cover Stonetop. We also cover equally obscure, somehow even more weird role-playing games. And that is what we're going to be doing tonight. We are going to be doing a first look at Pico, a game not written by, words by Felix Isaacs. So you can already tell that we're off to that's the kind of book that we're talking about. It's not written by, it's not designed by, it's words by Felix Isaacs. This is the same creator who did Wildsea. And if you're like, oh, what's Wildsea? Well, we did at least one or maybe two first looks on Wildsea. Wildsea is a game where rampant verdant growth overwhelmed the planet Earth, or whatever planet, creating a sea of forests that cover the entire planet, and you sail it on chainsaw ships. And secrets are real and tangible, and you can collect them and use them to cast magic. It's a weird game. But tonight might be even wilder and weirder. So shout out to the patrons, especially Mr. Adam Hart, who sponsored this first look. Thank you, Adam, for sponsoring. Thank you for your patronage. We are going to be doing a first look. So if you've never been to a first look before, what we do here is we take a first look at a game. I have never looked at this game before. I obviously am familiar with the designer. I'm familiar with his prior work, but this will be a new approach for me. So I'm going to be taking a look at it, giving my thoughts, not a review. You have to play it, have to really spend some time with it to review it. It's more of just my first impression, first look. I will be looking, however, to see what is this game about. Does it have a strong identity? Something that kind of leaps out and says, this is why you should play this game instead of, say, any of these other games. And then if we can figure that out, can we do the mechanics that the game have support that core concept? And does the game have a play pattern or a reward cycle that will encourage you to, kind of do the thing? Like in D&D, theoretically, you're encouraged to, kill monsters to get experience points to level up. And you want to level up so that you can kill cooler monsters. So you could argue that that mechanic works fairly okay. Any case, so yeah, this is a first look, and we're going to be digging into that. Pico, words by Felix Isaacs, art by Zakarib. Also, by the way, in case you're wondering what the hell is going on, I am too, because I'm a little bit not loopy, but this is my third stream in under 24 hours. I streamed 20 hours ago. I streamed about 10 hours ago, and now I'm streaming now. So today's super chat goal is just to support Derek as he does his insanity. My tip goal, however, is my new keyboard fund, because this is my control key. My other key broke off, but I actually I needed it to work, so I thumbtack, or I used blue tack to stick it in place, and it is still holding. So I'm not going to take that off to show you my other key, my shift key, because I need that one. I don't want that one to break. But control, I use a lot. I probably use I don't want to say I use control more than most people, but you use control a lot when you're using like Adobe Photoshop and stuff. So I use it a lot. I guess people use it for control copy and control paste, but I use it even more than that. So this is Pico. And we're going to get into it. So right off the bat, we have this kind of, we see a cover art of bugs, buggy-like creatures. We see a big cat, some sort of boar in the background, maybe a frog. And the illustrations look a little bit, even the font face looks a little bit, cutesy, for lack of a better word. But make no mistake, this is a Gigantor game. That's right. It is 360 pages. So this is an absolutely massive game. So great stuff. But we have a bunch of chapters here, so we're gonna dig into it. Now, of course, we're not gonna be able to cover everything in here. It's just a first look. So even though I get interested in games and then these things end up taking 5 hours, but that's the way it goes. Greetings, those who would be tiny bugs. And welcome to the full release of Pico. I'm Felix Isaacs, creator of the Wildsea and the Wild Words engine. And now this. What you have on screen is in front of you is a finished version of Pico, a much larger game than I ever had in mind when I first contracted Zakrarb to draw me some cute bugs. Initially meant to be a 60-page project, now 360 pages. I may have overshot. Thank you, Jake.
Jacob Online tipped $10, roughly 16 keys worth of keyboard.
I appreciate it. Now, if you missed it, what was occurring the other day when my keyboard broke was a discussion about whether or not I should replace it. So when I bought this keyboard, I didn't live stream. I've had this keyboard for at least 6 years, 7 years. And I bought a really, really clickety-clackety mechanical keyboard. It's heavy duty. It's very clicky-clacky. It's power. It's plugged in. It's not wireless. Because I like clicky-clacky keyboards. But now I'm a live streamer, and clicky-clacky keyboards can be kind of annoying. And having a wireless keyboard can be nice. So I kind of want to see what the space is like and see if I can figure out a nice happy medium. I don't want to get like a completely soft, squishy, shitty, the kind of keyboard I'm talking about with like the gel pads underneath them, because those just, they're so unsatisfying to work on. But at the same time, I do want something that will, work nicely for, the audience. But wireless is also nice. Historically, I haven't really liked wireless keyboards because it's just annoying to charge them and it's annoying to plug them in. But it is nice when I'm working like with, a top-down shot, or if I'm working with my Wacom tablet. So I appreciate it. Yes, Wes is back. Wes was, of course, in our stream this morning playing Grim, son of Grosh, or something. I can't remember exactly what it is. I did go onto the Lord of the Rings Discord, Wes, and I did get some answers to our questions. And I also sparked, obviously, of course, I immediately started not a flame war, but I started a debate war about one of the other questions that I have and whether or not that applies or not. But anyways. All right. So a huge, tiny world. Core concepts. By the way, Felix knows how to write RPGs, and a lot of the stuff that I grade people on, he does very well with. Or they do very well with. I don't know what their pronouns are. But everyone is bugs. All characters in Pico are bugs, and they're probably cute. It's a huge world. There are no humans left. Frogs are scary. Pico Titans are the safest way to travel. Pico Titans are things like cats and foxes and moles or rabbits that bugs can befriend and ride, sometimes making little huts on their back or heading to somewhere safe. Pico Titans won't fight bugs for you. They've been trained not to, but they might fight other titanic creatures or scare away threats. Cute and weird rule the day. Weird is always good, but here it is tempered by cute. The aim of the game is to solve problems. What's the tiny problem? A village being attacked by a squirrel, or a farm needing extra help with a harvest, or rescuing a lost explorer. The hazards and challenges of Pico shouldn't revolve around killing, but rather finding creative ways to solve problems. This doesn't mean no violence, but it does mean no cruelty. Wouldn't be Twitch without, of course, horrible, horrible spam. So right off the rip, this is a very clear delineation about what this game is and what this game isn't. And immediately my first thought is, okay, so mouse guard, but with bugs. I mean, this premise is basically the premise of Mouse Guard, which is everyone is mice. It's a huge world. There are no humans. Hawks and owls and other things that eat mice are scary. Well, not necessarily Pico Titans. There's no mouse Titans. I don't want to say cute, but mousy stuff rules the day. And the aim of the game is to solve problems. And that's not to say that Mouse Guard isn't a little bit violent, but a lot of these things like helping rescue a lost explorer or helping a village with like a medicinal crisis or like a disease, those are very clear. Those are very common tasks that a Mouse Guard might be assigned by Gwendolyn to go, or not Gwendolyn. Is it Gwendolyn? It might be Gwendolyn. I don't remember the name of the head of the Mouse Guard. Is it Gwendolyn? I don't remember. Anyways, so it seems very similar to Mouse Guard, and I'm already curious if they have a lexicon. Ooh, so I think because this is like a preview PDF, I don't think like the game is out yet. It does not have a bookmark, or yeah, it doesn't have bookmarks. Anyways, I was going to see if it had a. So we got some microfiction, sort of, not really, but we have a world where basically a long time ago humans vanished. So it's not like there were no humans; they just, humans just disappeared. But yeah, there was a night many, many years ago when everything ended. But no more pesticides, no more deforestation, no more fish hooks or bait boxes or fly paper. Pets ran free from quiet houses, and roach motels showed nothing but vacancies. So the biggest change that bugs noticed was it immensely got quieter, especially near those black stone ribbons that they'd learned not to cross, and the immense above-ground warrens full of beeping machines. The world hadn't suddenly become safe. There were still stoats to contend with, and lizards and snappy plants, and a bug might meet there and then a bird, blah, blah, blah. So what happened? The Mysteriopocalypse. But we don't know what happened, and in fact, it doesn't matter what happened. The world of Pico is set out in this book to an extent, and if that's all that you would be making together, if all where the humans go is a question you want to answer, do that. But otherwise, it doesn't really actually matter. But really, the end of humanity that Pico posits is just a way to get them out of the way and a chance for the smaller creatures to have a moment in the spotlight. So we have influences. Pico wouldn't exist if I never read Discworld by Terry Pratchett, which is his take on weird fiction. There's also something about this line, a game about bugs, if I never played Hollow Knight. And who knows, maybe Silk Song will be out by the time this goes to print. Note, it is, but only just. This runs with Sunless Sea, Heart, 13th Age, Blades in the Dark, Tunic, Hyper Light Drifter, and The Legend of Zelda. Note, no mention of Mouse Guard, but the themes of Pico are community, creativity, and adventure. The game is designed to be cute, to be wholesome, and not to be taken too seriously. And so, I mean, in some ways here, this is the quote of my good buddy Kaz, who likes to say he takes RPGs sincerely, but he doesn't treat them very seriously. So that kind of this idea of like, look, you're going to lean into it and you're going to have fun with it. You're not going to be a shitster. Just because you're not treating it serious doesn't mean you want to just burn it all to the ground, but it's not a serious game, Bugs. Everything's about bugs. Now, I also can't help but feel sometimes that like games like this, it's like, was this more of an art project or was this more of an idea? But why bugs? But anyways, we've got bugs. We've got information about, bugs, which is like this idea here is like, basically bugs don't differentiate. Obviously they don't, basically they're not racist bugs. Bugs stick together. They're like the Mighty Ducks, Bugs are resilient as hell. But bugs are ingenious. and bugs are naturally inquisitive. So a lot of basically trying to sell you on, hey, like why, what? Now, of course, again, I mean, obviously bugs in real life aren't any of these things, right? So we are anthropomorphizing the shit out of bugs. I mean, like there's a obviously like a metaphor here, maybe it's just, going over my head, but, which isn't to say that it's obtuse. I'm just saying, like, I'm kind of I'm a little bit tired, but anyways, real life bugs are incredibly racist. That's right. That's right. We know this from scientific fact. I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of, I don't want to say art house take here, but it's like, again, one of my favorite games of all time is Monster Hearts by Avery Alder. And the whole idea of Monster Hearts is using the idea of being a monster and, kind of being torn between being a human and being a monster and not being in control of who you are and how people react to you as a metaphor for being queer. So I'm not quite sure what the theme here is, but, or it could just be, maybe this person really like, ants or bug life and they really want to make this here. So we have a size chart here from nano size to Titan size. These are references to sizes throughout Pico. I mean, it's right in the name. It's a game about tiny things. But even in a world where almost everything is tiny, relative size still matters. So we have nano, small, just like kind of like D&D, except we go from nano. And in this case, Titan is bigger than a roast chicken, which is definitely a interesting way to describe how big something is. Could just be a chicken, but we went with roast chicken. The upper and lower limits. The characters of Pico, the bugs you'll be making in this game, are small, but you could play a large bug or a nano-sized bug. So, why do we have a party of adventurers? Bugs tend to be naturally inquisitive, and with a wide world spreading out around them, can you blame them? So for every few bugs that decide to settle down, there's another driven by the inescapable urge to wander. For the second sort, the horizon isn't just a vista, it's an invitation, a challenge. This feeling, this deep and beautiful wanderlust, is the drive behind the formation of adventuring bands. Kind of derived a little bit. Groups of bugs pulled together by the joys of travel and forge into better versions of themselves by going on journeys and facing the challenges ahead. For a more balanced view, take a look at some few of the reasons why bugs head out into unknown dangers of the mysterious post-mysteriocalypse and what they may hope to achieve while they're out there. Some reasons to roam. The reasons on the right are only a handful of common examples. Who knows why bugs really do anything? So it could be for the excitement. It could be for treasure. It could be for an opportunity to learn. It could be for a new place to call home. Trekkie says, your community has a cat. It has a castle on its back. It's a cat titan. You're home away from home. And your anti-titan defense. Also, your god. That would probably be pretty accurate. I would think that the cats would cleanse you and kill you by licking you and trying to remove you as a parasite. But, who am I? I don't own cats. So there's a lot of, I'm going to say that there's a lot of, I want to say referential humor here, like one more step, Mr. Bofro, and it'll be the farthest from, oh, bugger, I've lost count. Obviously like a joke about Sam, right? So, the game itself is not very, very taking itself very seriously. But again, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to solve small problems, big problems. You're going to potentially get into some scraps. You might learn some stuff. You might visit some stuff. So there's very much a wholesome slice of life, just, I don't want to say it's like Ryutama or Wander Home-esque, but it feels fairly Wander Home-esque. I mean, obviously it's MythWorks and it's a 360-page book, so we know there's going to be some mechanics and some character sheets in here, but after we get through the what is this game about, we'll take a look at the character sheet. In fact, the idea, you might not even need to have a goal. You could just head out into the wild world and experience an adventure. I'm also noticing that the book is chock full of art. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. this art isn't for me. I don't think it's bad. It's just not my. And you might say, "Oh, Derek only likes super serious art." No. I think that there's a lot of charming art out there that is, But I am not really the super cutesy person, and bugs don't necessarily do it for me. In any case, so we've got. It sounds like there's kind of a built-in premise around a world. So we've got a particular settlements. Like the cola moons, a series of old soda cans hanging from a tangle of washing lines, each converted into a home or storefront accessible only from above. So why would you go to comfort? What can you do when you go to a settlement? Well, you can trade, you can eat, you can learn, you prepare. I think this is like the 6th time we've seen learn. So obviously that's a very important aspect to this idea of this game. And again, you can see, this, telling us a lot about the game. The open road? Nah, forget it. All the excitement I could ever want is here. At the Cap Golf Annual February Frenzy Tournament, baby. Lit Von Chucker, 5-time Cap Golf champion. What else could you do? Well, in town, you can let off some steam. You could attend a festival. You could go to a tavern. You could attend a sporting event like some cap golf. You could go to, look at that. He's cap golf. It's frisbee golf. It's frisbee golf, but with bottle caps. Oh, how cute. What about things that aren't bugs? Well, we've got dogs and frogs and raccoons and bats and mice and, This is borderline microfiction. I mean, I'm not saying it is microfiction, but I mean, I guess it's setting the tone for the world. But it's very whimsical and fun. Like in case you don't know, what a bird is or what a fish is. This is what a bird is. But you should never judge a bird by its cover. And then cats get up. This person loves cats. Cats get a whole section of their own. I don't really like cats. So, by the way, it does say in direct contradiction of what Trekkie said, cats are not gods. So that is that. But they are made of magic. So there's that. Here are some felines of particular note. We've got Mira the Midnight Biter, Dee Dee the Adored, Tiny Stinkface, Clouseau, Caddy, Julius's Jujon, Samson, and Pimpy. And your large-scale friends are known as Pico Titans. Basically, they are gigantic beasts, for a bug anyways, and that the bugs have kind of sort of tamed. So there we go. We've got a cat with a little, little bug ship attached to the back of it. So basically, instead of riding chainsaws, you now ride cats. And your bug, instead of being some really hyper weird quasi-bug thing. But cats, foxes, otters, and raccoons are the most common of Pico Titans. So is the idea that you automatically start with a Pico Titan? I guess the idea, so I think this is one way to bring other animals into the game, I suppose. But the other problem is, I guess, as a bug, it's not very plausible that you would be able to move very far if you didn't have some sort of larger creature in order to cover your distance. Interestingly, compared to how fast a bug moves, well, I guess unless you're a flying bug, but compared to how fast a bug moves, this would be like the equivalent of a fantasy game of you having a Harrier jet instead of a horse, because, it can obviously travel much, much, much faster than a bug can. And again, a lot of art, I mean, the book is large for sure. And we're not really, let's look at the book view. I mean, I'd say 50% of this real estate is art for sure. And there definitely is at least a near, a piece of inset art on basically every 2-page spread. So there's art on every 2-page spread, literally. In some cases, more than that. So, not saying that makes the game shorter. I'm just saying, like, there is a reason for its length, and it's just a ton of art. And it's obviously all done by this the same artist, and that's cool because it does definitely ties it together a lot. And again, if you read, from the size and the shape of this book, it looks like it's also probably in the same printing format as Wildsea. Which is it's a little bit more. It's like a weird. It's not landscape, and it's not digest size, and it's not A4. It's some sort of strange square-ish shape. So that is what the game is about, and it said a lot, but it also said not a lot. It kind of just seems like you're a bug living in a world that doesn't have humans in it anymore, and you explore and you get into trouble and you solve bug problems and you do bug stuff if bugs were anthropomorphized. All right, cool. I mean, the only thing that we can really kind of take away from it is it's supposed to be cute. It is supposed to be not super serious. It is not necessarily supposed to be hyper violent or certainly not cruel. And that's what we got. All right, so again, we're on page 28. There is no bookmark to this PDF, so I can't just like cut right to the character sheet. But we will look for one here anyways. Hey, look, it's all the rules of the game. Okay. Okay. Well, it looks like we have 2 different character sheets. One is for a short picnic, and the other one is for a long pick odyssey. I'm guessing the one character sheet is for like a one-shot or a multi-shot, and the other one is probably for a more proper, longer campaign. I guess that's interesting to have different character sheets. Maybe. Maybe that's not quite the right. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you have 2 character sheets. I don't know. I'm just getting a sense for what the game has. We've got aspects with tracks next to them. We've got skills. We have a mood tracker, a mystery tracker, a bits and bobs, looks like some sort of slot-based encumbrance system. And we also have a sheet for journeying and traveling, which is, profile view here. One again for a picnic and another one for a pick odyssey. So again, I'm not 100% sure with that. I'm going to guess it's like, short versus long, but I could be wrong here. But we'll take a look. So there's a lot of stuff here. Now we'll have to remind ourselves. So, from MythWorks, how that worked, or from Wildsea, how that worked was it was kind of like a derivative of Blades in the Dark with even more made up language and words. All right. We've had a lot of conversations about this lately about, games that come up with, like the One Ring, right? It's not a game master in the One Ring. It's a lore master, And here, you're not a GM. I mean, it does say in parentheses, but you're a weaver. And if you want to be really technical, you're a weaver of very engaging stories involving bugs. And then, why is it a weaver and not a GM? Because bugs have no masters, but they do tend to get themselves caught up in strands of stories bigger than themselves. One person at the table takes the role of weaver, playing NPCs, presenting the world, and helping to guide. Just call it GM. I know. I mean, and I say that even about the One Ring. they call it the lore master. Just call it GM. I'll even throw the One Ring underneath, which I played earlier today on this channel, and I'll say like, you don't need to be the lore master, just the GM. But if you are going to call yourself the Weaver, we don't need this. You need some characters, some bugly characters. You need some sheets. Everyone gets a character sheet. You also need a roaming sheet if you want to record the features of your Pico Titan once you gain access to one. The roaming sheet is shared by everyone at the table. All right. You use D6s. Every player and the GM needs a bundle of D6s. 6 of them is a good number, but you might want to bring a couple more just in case one rolls under a chair or something. It happens. Now, again, this is a complete tangent, and I understand that who they're writing for here, but it's like as Derek, I could never imagine writing an RPG book and writing that. I just couldn't do it. And obviously, this is a very different game with like a very different style and a very different sense. But I could never imagine putting that into my game. I just, I'm just so dead inside. I don't have it in me. So it goes without saying, the writing style of this is not my writing. Is not my preferred. I don't like it. Like, again, it might be a fantastic system and area, but I don't like this style of rule book writing. This kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're just buddies, and I'm just talking to you. I don't personally like that. That's me. It doesn't say that you need pencils, so I think we're safe, Jake. All right. We've got scenes, montages, and journeys, which all have their own rules and can happen in pretty much any order. 2 scenes, no problem. A journey with a montage, then a journey, fine. So we've got scenes, montages, and journeys. Scenes are sort of our free form area. We scuttle around, we get into trouble, we have a big good time. The spotlight, more on that in a second, moves from player to player freely as they say. So this is like free play, basically, generic RPG conversation, no initiative, no mechanical procedure. They're calling those scenes. Montages become a little bit more structured. In every montage, every bug gets the chance to do a single task, a long action condensed down into a sentence or two of description, and maybe a roll of the dice. This helps longer, slower periods of in-game time pass more quickly than the real world. So basically, if we're doing, the classic montage, it's like, okay, it's 3 hours until the party. What are you all doing in town, before the party? What are you doing to get ready, or what do you do before town? And you kind of basically go around, and everybody gets a little vignette. Everybody gets to, describe, hopefully very briefly, and respect the passage of time in the spotlight. This is the type of thing that some people have a lot of umbrage with, because they say, this is why I play role. I can't believe you would skip over this and turn this into a montage. I want to play out all the nuanced, minute details of, my character getting, going to buy a dress. And I agree with the author here, which is that, it's nice to be able to just summarize that. And maybe you make a dice roll, maybe you don't. The journey is the most structured of the 3 sort of play types. Journeys are what you use when bugs move from place to place. And it encapsulates a long trek, all the camps, the scouting expedition, as well as the hazards and mysteries found along the way. And spotlight, they use the term spotlight. We kind of know this from our time of PBTA. It's a game term for when everyone's looking at you and it's everyone's waiting to hear what you have to say. If the Weaver's describing something, they have the spotlight. And then if they ask a question, or if someone busts in with a question, they've got the spotlight, right? In scenes, the spotlight swings around. However, in montages, every bug gets the spotlight once. And then in a journey, the spotlight will mostly be on the Weaver as they describe the world and bring encounters into play. But bugs will also have their moments as they make lookout rolls, and make important decisions. The Tricky says 3 streams in less than 24 hours. Who's in for Derek going mad from the lack of sleep? Mad, I tell you. Yeah, it's we're burning it at both ends. I don't know. I need to get myself right before NightCon. Now, luckily next week I have next week sort of get ready. So, and again, you can see a lot of the stuff, we've been talking about Stonetop for the last 3-4 weeks. A lot of these terminologies, right, are applied from all of these different, games and all these different things. So we see here the conversation, and talking about safety tools and talking about how, we use and utilize that. And this is like, advice that we've seen in Daggerheart, which, talks about how like, well, maybe you have a scrap of paper and you just track if you have a hard time managing who gets the spotlight. So maybe you just write down how many actions they've had. I mean, I understand that some people need this. I personally think this advice is kind of bad. Because number one, I think it overly focuses your attention on some concept of balance, but also I think it distracts you from what's actually happening in the fiction. But more importantly than that, I think it ignores the fact that there's going to be scenes that are going to be more important for some characters than they're going to be for other characters, and I think that's okay. If you watched our stream this morning, there was a initial scene where the Hobbit kind of went on a little sneaky mission around the Elven camp, and a couple of other characters got drawn into the events of the actions, but like two of our players, Otar and Grom, really didn't do much of anything in that scene. And that's okay, because, it was a moment for the Hobbit to have sort of a little bit of a vignette. Hopefully it's, it's entertaining. You're being part of a collaborative story, and not everything has to be about you. So again, I'm not saying that this is like terrible. I'm just saying like I think that sometimes this does more harm than good. But it also seems like they are really hard coding the spotlight, like kind of like the way that Daggerheart did, right? They talk about like this as if it's a mechanic, right? Like if an ability allows a bug to steal the spotlight, they get to make a single action before they must pass it on. Once used, a stolen spotlight always moves to whatever it was headed to before it was stolen. And again, I don't like the mechanization of spotlight in Daggerheart. I'm not sure I'm going to like it here either. All right, tracks, which is their way of making a clock, which they did it in Wildsea, but making it a straight line instead of a clock, is used to track things. And they get a name, just like a clock, and you mark it with a diagonal line, and then you're one step closer to that thing happening. And then once the track is fully marked, something happens. So it's basically clocks, just written as a track. Oh, absolutely. I am not critiquing this advice at all, but I will say, well, I am critiquing this advice. I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like it can reinforce 5e D20 trad behaviors. And I think, and the reason I think that, Adam, is because of what I've seen happen in Daggerheart and the way that it, causes people to think about it in a very D&D like manner. Everybody has to get a turn. That type of thing. Now, here's where things get a little bit, they get a little bit wild wordsy, right? Which is, we have a mark, which is a single diagonal slash through a track. But there's also a burn. This is a cross, an X shape. A burn is a supermark, an indelible change that's impossible to clear. Why is this important? Because some tracks don't just count up. Marks can be cleared, erased, and to set progress backwards. How do marks get cleared? It all depends on the track. So this is where, the wild words, Felix likes his clever words and nomenclature, and it's not just victory points, it's a track, it's it's not just it's a mark, it's a cross, it's a burn. Here's a break. Breaks represent a vertical line in a track, which is the most that you can mark at any one time. They could also be used to represent different changes in the fiction or the hazard before it gets completely completed. And lastly, there are open tracks, but there are also hidden tracks where only the weaver can see how many boxes and marks there are. So they kind of establish that there's the idea between the tracks that you know about and the tracks that you don't know about. I will say, generally speaking, I've been using clocks for a very long time, I almost never use hidden tracks. I will make a clock that the players don't know what it does, but they can see that it's ticking towards completion. I do like to do that. It's some mystery event, and maybe they get engaged and they kind of research something. Even though they don't know what it is, they get it's like a sense that something bad is happening. It's kind of very similar to the eye awareness from the One Ring. All right, what do you do here to roll dice? Well, you're out on an adventure, days away from home, and you come across a sleeping scorpion. It's so big that it fills almost the entire path. What are you going to do here? You could risk waking it up. You could try to sneak past. You're going to take an action, a moment where the story brings an element of skill, choice, or randomness into play. How do we deal with this? Roll dice. Not everything requires a roll, but you should roll the dice when something is difficult, something is dangerous, something is dramatic. And I like that they use 3 Ds. Is it difficult, dangerous, or dramatic? Cool. We should roll. So we grab a D6 dice pool system, and then you read off the highest number as your result. So if you're familiar with Blades in the Dark, this is very similar to the Blades in the Dark system, where you're going to accumulate a pile of D6s, you roll them, and you're looking for the highest die that you rolled. And in some cases, if you roll doubles, then you can potentially get like a crit or something. How many dice do you get to roll? Well, you're going to add your skill, your aspect, and your advantage. Meaning the maximum number of dice you'll ever have in your pool is 6. We saw on the character sheet that your skill ranks go up to 3. So, we'll assume that probably you can get up to 3 dice from your skill, probably maybe up to 2 dice from your aspect, 1 dice from advantage. We'll see here. So, I got it backwards. Okay, so you can get up to 3 dice from your skill ranks. You can get up to 1 dice from your aspect, and you can get up to 2 dice from advantage. These are more situational and basically rely on the fictional positioning, your tactical fictional positioning. So, for example, you might have an environmental bonus or discovery working in your favor. You might get help from another nearby bug, or you might use some of your gear. So either way, the most that you can roll up to is 6d6. 3, 1, and 2 from your skills, your aspects, and your advantages. All right. So just like in Blades in the Dark, which is itself a variation of Powered by the Apocalypse, we're going to take a look at the highest die roll, and that we're either going to get basically a full success, right? We make progress, we get to mark a track, we get to get an outcome that is good for us, and it doesn't come with any downsides. The most common result is going to be that we roll a 5 or a 4 as our highest die, in which case we get success at a cost. And then, of course, if we roll a 1, 2, or 3 as our highest die, we fail. And not only that, it's not just fail and then that's it. It's fail and, right? So not only did you not succeed, but there's some sort of drawback or some sort of consequence. Again, one of the things that these type of games really try to avoid is the null result, where nothing happens, right? Where it's like, what did you succeed at doing? Nothing. And what happened? Nothing. So it's like nothing happened. There's always going to be something happening. Now, as a little bit of an additional component to this, if you roll doubles, independently of your results, then something unexpected happens and there is a twist. Again, this can be suggested by anybody, but the Weaver has the final say, and we'll get into that in a couple pages. Okay, so same thing. This is basically the same as Wildsea. It's basically the same thing as... In its own way, it's kind of the same thing as Blades in the Dark. We have action types. Interesting. Oh, there went my control key. Most of the time, an action is just something you choose to do just because you want to do it. You're in control and you get to do it. But sometimes the Weaver will ask you to make a die roll themselves. And that is a reaction, right? So this is the difference between, you know, I'm going to jump over the pit and try to get to there before, you know, something bad happens versus, you know, a fireball is shooting at you. You need to leap out of the way. Mechanically, they work the same, but reactions aren't voluntary. You're in the spotlight and you have to do something. Sometimes you might just make a luck roll, which is just a single D6. And basically, if you roll high, or the GM might say, yeah, I'll say, you know what, she's in the bar if I roll, you know, if you roll 4 or higher on a D6, which is just another way of saying just literally just disclaim decision making. Sometimes called the fortune die or fortune roll from Blades in the Dark. So again, basically rewriting Blades in the Dark, which is what we also saw from Wildsea. Now, if a player rolls doubles, they're almost always given the option of choosing a twist, an unexpected happening suggested by any player at the table, but ultimately decided upon by the Weaver. This could be positive, negative, or useful, or it could be harmful. Twists are narrative by default. They are suggestions of what's happening in the fiction of the game, but there could be a mechanical impact as well. So this is where a lot of people start to struggle. I mean, people struggle with anything, but like suddenly when you've got like, you know, you're climbing. I'm not saying that this is good or bad. I'm just saying it is what it is. You know, a bug is trying to climb to the top of a sunflower to get a good look at the sugar cube palace. Just speculating here. The Lord of the Slug Marshes. You climb to the top of the great and the mighty sunflower, and a player rolls success with a complication, and they roll doubles. And suddenly it's like, okay, you succeed, but there's a complication, but there's also a twist. And not for nothing, that is a lot for a lot of people and groups, I think, to handle. And I can understand why people sometimes have a hard time with these games. Ah, yes. Now, we gave crap to Grimwild, and we gave crap to Wildsea for all of their silly terms, like thorns and stuff like that. But in this case, we have a cut. Cut is how Pico measures difficulty, a chance of lowering the dice you get. Now, this is something that Blades in the Dark does not do. Blades in the Dark never mechanicizes difficulty in that way. What this game, though, does say is says if you want something to be difficult, you remove a number of results from the dice you rolled, starting with the highest. So if we rolled 4 dice and we got a 1, 2, 4, 5. Oh, that's a bad example. If we got a 1, 2, 5, 6, our highest die result is a 6. So we got full success, no problems. But if there was a cut, we would start with that 6, remove it from the dice pool entirely, and we're left now with a 5 as our highest die roll, which means we got success with a complication. If there were 2 cuts, we would remove the 6 and the 5, and now we're left with just a 2, which is a disaster, a failure with a problem, right? But we have different types of cuts. There's 5 types of cuts. Cut is applied when something makes an action harder than usual, but there are tough cuts, armor cuts, speed cuts, camo cuts, and complex cuts. A tough cut is because of challenging circumstances. An armor cut is usually when you're dealing with combat or a scuffle, and it's because you're trying to do something to a well-defended or heavily armored foe. A speed cut is when you're trying to do something faster. And so it becomes harder because you're trying to do it faster. A camo cut is when things are murky, things like because of invisibility or bad, visibility, rain, snow, sleet, fog, a camouflage praying mantis. A complex cut is situations that are unpredictable or require extreme thinking and cleverness. And again, there's ways to interact with each of these cuts so that you avoid the cut. So, for example, if something is really difficult and challenging, you might get a cut because it's so complex. Well, if it's a complex cut, you might solve that by, say, slowing down and taking your time. In some ways, this is kind of reminiscent of like Sparks and Shadows, kind of. It's just basically a way of giving a sort of mechanical framework to the type of way that, giving a name to what the reason for the problem is. And it's basically saying, if something is making a task more difficult, then you should, apply, roughly it should be probably broken down into one of these 5 categories. Now, again, is this completely prescriptive? No, I don't think so. I mean, it might be, but it's more of a way of describing it. So note, by the way, that generally speaking, you want to let the player know before they roll that there's going to be a cut. That way they can go into it and make appropriate plans. Basically all about agency. Cut stack. So if you ever have multiple cuts, they all add up. So if you have an armor cut and a speed cut, they add together. So you might be removing multiple dice from your pool. If you ever cut yourself all the way down to 0 results, you get automatically a failure. And you're not rolling any dice. You basically automatically get the disaster if that's a 1, 2, or 3. So in some ways, cuts are kind of their way of doing like position from Blades in the Dark. The difference with position in Blades in the Dark is position doesn't actually affect your odds of succeeding. What it does is it tells you if you fail or if you partially succeed and there are consequences, how bad are those consequences going to be? But there's also impact, and this is pretty much word for word from Blades in the Dark, which is this idea of effect, right? And in Blades in the Dark, we have no effect, limited effect, standard effect, great effect, and extreme effect. And so here we have none, low, normal, and giga impact. So, for example, you might be able to do something, and the Weaver will let you roll, but it's so ineffective that even if you succeed, you won't mark any boxes on the track. A low impact will mark 1 less box than you normally would. Normal, obviously, would mark, the 1 box that you normally mark. And a giga impact, your effects are titanic, and if you're affecting a track, you mark every box right up until either the end of the track or the next track break. Giga impacts solve problems quickly. And you know what? It seems like it's stupid, but this is a way. This is a way of mechanically dealing with like the problems that people have sometimes when you mechanically reinforce fiction and people get too caught up in that mechanical reinforcement. The classic example is the party needs to get through, in this example, the party needs to get through a door. And the GM's like, okay, I'm going to make a clock. Let's make it a little bit more complex, right? The party needs to get through like a vault door. And the GM makes a clock, and there's a 4 clock. And a player goes, that normally you might be thinking, oh, like I'm going to weaken the hinges and I'm going to try to, remove the lock, and then the other person's going to knock it down or whatever, and each person, it's like a 4 clock or it's a 6 clock. And that way the party has to work together to, get enough points. But what do you do when someone, a lot of people are like, okay, well, my player said I'm going to blow up the door completely. And like they succeeded, but what? I only marked 2 ticks of the clock. So the door got blown up and is no longer there, but somehow the challenge is still there. No, obviously not. In that case, fuck the clock. But a lot of people have a hard time with that mindset. And so this is a way of sort of mechanically basically saying, oh, you're blowing the door up, you're burning the door down, okay? The wooden door down. Cool. That has giga impact. And so if you make your check, you basically just completely solve the problem. Now, do you really need that rule? No, but I mean, I've seen people struggle with this idea of, what am I going to do? Like if I'm using a clock and the player succeeds, but in the fiction, they would just be through the issue. Anyways. So here we have a bunch of examples of how impact might work. Now, there's a lot of things here about how to do this. Generally speaking, in Blaze in the Dark, they have this idea of potency, quality, and scale. So in Blaze in the Dark, is this idea of is what you're doing particularly effective against the thing that you're dealing with, right? You might have potency, right? If I'm trying to use a sword to knock down a wooden door, that might not be very effective. If I'm using a big battering ram, or a big, a hammer, a big mace, a big war hammer, that might be more effective. You might say you have potency. Scale is a question of, is the size of your thing or is the number of people that you have a benefit or a detriment to what you're trying to do? For example, if the scale of our group is large and we're trying to sneak into someplace, that actually might hurt our impact. Whereas if we are trying to, intimidate a city block, then having more people might actually increase our impact because the scale matters. And then the last one is quality, which is basically like, okay, you have a battering ram, great, you have potency, but is it made out of wood or is it made out of, adamantium? Okay, cool. It's made out of adamantium. Great. Oh, who are you intimidating the city block with? Just a bunch of random people you pulled off the street, or are you doing it with the hardcore, noted ruffian gang, out of the Sixth Street gang? Oh, they're known for being pretty intimidating and pretty scary bastards. Great, you have high quality, and so you can use these things. And there's a lot of discussion here in the book, I'm sure, about how to do this, but a lot of this is just kind of Blaze in the Dark 101. But this is why having the conversation matters, because the GM might say, yeah, that's a great idea. You get giga impact. It's a way of basically combining rolling with also still with what you say and how you say it matters, All right. Truths. The Mysterio-apocalypse definitely had some serious effects on the world of Pico, but nobody can quite explain what they were. It put bugs at the top of the pecking order. Again, with the writing style, that it's just not for me. But it's thematically, at least, realistically, birds are still the masters of pecking. And it for sure removed a particular common species of two-legged titans that loved building unexplainable things. But the how and why are lost in, well, mystery. All right, so there's this idea of this game called truths. Truths are established by players pursuing their bug's mystery, a question that is decided during character creation and chipped away at through the process of making discoveries, which is a game mechanic. When a grand discovery is made, the Weaver records it on the group's collaborative roaming sheet. As these truths affect more than just the character that introduced them, they are now a fact of the world. So here we are. Ryan is playing a bearded fly, part of a band of bugs wandering the vast, gloomy interior of the Shadow House. He has a mystery to solve. How is glass so strong and yet so clear? Which is pretty appropriate for a fly, if you think about it. During his adventures, he makes several small discoveries. He realizes that glass dulls sound, but doesn't stop light, that it makes a satisfying clinking noise when other glass hits it, and that if a sound is high-pitched enough, it will make the glass shatter completely. With these three small discoveries under his belt, he takes the spotlight to make a grand discovery, that glass is, in fact, solidified music. The Weaver records this grand discovery on the roaming sheet as a new truth, capital T, of the post-Mysterio-apocalypse, and Ryan gets to choose a new mystery to figure out things in the future. So, we have here sort of a mechanical... So, in Fabula Ultima, you can spend a Fabula point, basically at any time, to basically alter the story and establish a truth. And you can just do this for free and, you know, as long as you're not contradicting anything. In this game, it sounds like you have to kind of earn them. And ultimately, after you make enough discoveries, you basically get to sort of state a truth about this weird world. Now, it might be like the bug way of thinking about it, or it could actually be something really fun and weird and clever. Like the idea of like, oh, glass is solidified music. That makes sense. You know, that might be just a metaphorical way of the bugs understanding what glass is, but it also could quite literally be, you know, true in a certain weird sort of sense of imagination. But the idea is that you're almost playing the game as a player to earn the right to make those kind of judgments and make those kind of decisions. So, and we can see here that, you know, truth can affect the direction of a story and the flavor of the world, right? And again, you can use truths to call upon an environmental advantage in the right situation. And you can also use it to gain a free twist. Once per session, each player can have their bug call on a truth of the world to generate a free twist once per session. So mechanically, when you generate truths, you can kind of use them to kind of start to tweak or steer the game towards a certain thing. So it's very like collaborative world building. You know, you're basically playing the game so that you can create these sort of new truths that are true about your version of this world and, you know, having fun with that, you know. Oh my gosh. There's something called combos and finishers. When the weaver sets a track that the bugs have to fill in order to achieve something big, they may also set a smaller 3-box combo track. If you are taking actions and a combo track is in play, a box can burn a box on one of their aspects as they perform an action. This represents the bug putting an extra effort to contribute to the combo. And the aspect is burned, whether that burn means you put an X through it, right? It's always the player's choice whether to burn in order to add to a combo. But if this action is successful, whether you get a 4, 5, or 6, you also mark a box on the combo track in addition to any usual effects. When a band of bug manages to mark all 3 boxes on a combo track, the next action taken in that scene becomes a finisher. What does a finisher do? When you choose this option, whatever action you take is treated as if it's 1 step higher in terms of impact. So no impact would become low impact. Regular impact would become giga impact. Or you can ignore all cuts. The fruits of your planning are revealed as you find a way to bypass every negative that would bring you down. Ignoring all cut on an action allows you to triumph when a conflict or disaster would otherwise be assured. So, what is this doing mechanically? All right, let me think about this. So, number one, we're on page 47. So let's go back to the character sheet real quick. Wow, I went all the way back to exactly where I was. I didn't mean to do that. But I guess we could just read through all this stuff. Just the rule summary. Okay, here we go. Character sheet. So we can see here our aspects, right? And we've got this track. So, you know, as we're marking them, we're probably not going to be able to use them as much. But the combo track allows us to sort of use our resources so that we can both add to the clock, but also make progress towards whatever else that we're dealing with at the same time. See, part of the problem with some of these games is that it can be very unsatisfying. So this is just an RPG truth, okay? It can be very unsatisfying to, like, contribute to the group check, but not, like, do anything else. I mean, this is just my general experience with it. So what's really cool about this is, like, it doesn't take the place of you trying to fill in the normal clock or the normal track, right? Instead, you can, if you want to, and you're successful and you burn an aspect, then you can add to both the combo track and any usual effects, which could be nothing. So effectively, at that point, you are just adding to the combo track. But it's neat that you can kind of add to both. And of course, the question would be, well, if I can add to both, why wouldn't I just add to both every single time? And the reason is because you do have to use up some of your kind of meta currency in the form of marking your aspects. All right. So that is it for the basic rules. We're basically rolling dice. Sometimes if something is difficult, we're going to remove the highest rolled dice, or maybe 2 highest rolled dice, or 3 highest rolled dice, unless we deal with them, the problem, which is called a cut. And everything in this game is basically built around filling in tracks. And depending on how effective our action is, we might fill in 0 boxes, we might fill in 1 box, we might fill in all the boxes. So that's basically the gist of the game. Now, scenes. Now, remember, scenes are the non-structured version of the game. This is where we're just kind of talking and having a conversation. Who's there? What's going on? Why are we having this scene? So when we're sort of exploring the space, looking into a new area during a journey or whatnot, one of the easiest ways to define a location is to think about what is interesting there, either to your bug or to you as a player. These are points of interest, or POIs. Points of interest aren't just useful for setting a scene, they have mechanical benefits too. Once a POI is established, it can be used for environmental advantage when making an action roll, or as something to investigate when gathering bits and bobs. Points of interest might be dangerous too. Now again, this is just mechanically creating a framework over stuff that is otherwise just sort of hand-waved, and good GMs get it, right? So, for example, you might have a point of interest, which is, a really tall lamppost. Okay, cool. Well, if I can use that really tall lamppost to my advantage, then I might be able to gain some sort of environmental advantage when I go to make an action roll, say to scout out our next location, right? So it's really just a way of sort of, figuring out a way to sort of highly present to people, hey, this is what there is to kind of mess around with. Now, note, by the way, that it's not just the GM who can put these into a scene, right? Players can ask questions about things that might be important to them. A player whose bug loves to swim might ask about water in the area, and anyone playing a tiny gourmet might wonder if there's some amazing smells. So again, sometimes, it's one of those situations where, you ask questions and the GM says, oh yeah, there's totally a small little pond nearby. And you're like, cool. So now you can think of the scene as having like this tag, right? POI, little pond. Note, not every scene will have points of interest that work for everyone. If it did, the game would get pretty boring. Always feel free to ask, but from time to time, the answer might just be no. Right? Sometimes you're just not near water and you can't use your little swimming abilities. So we have a side note here about theater of the mind. If you've been playing tabletop games for a while, you're likely familiar with this term. Pico is a game where almost all of the action takes place within the theater of the mind. A fancy way of saying you imagine stuff happening as you talk about it. Locations do not have their little maps. You do not have miniatures, though we admit it would be disgustingly cute. And the fiction of what's going on is only constrained by the rules and the story. When you use theater of mind, you have license to be a little bit flexible about what is and isn't in a scene. Those points of interest, maybe there's a cool one that you missed talking about, but because it would make the immediate play more interesting. So, it gives you a lot more room. One of the problems I have, especially with more detailed maps, is, people see what's on the map, on the battle map, say, for example, and they say, oh, that's what's in this scene. There's no room for, to be grown of any way. Hey, thank you for sending out that gift sub, Agile Monk. Cheers. And part of the thing about being a theater of the mind is like you need to be like you need to be gracious in accepting what the Weaver says, but you also need to be a little bit of an advocate for yourself, right? So, for example, the GM doesn't meant, let's say, for whatever reason, our character is really good in water or something, or our character really likes getting something to eat. And the GM describes the scene, and there's no mention of any food. Now, is that because there is no food there and you should take the GM's world as gospel? No, but if you want to advocate for yourself and build to the rules, and again, you need to be gracious in accepting that sometimes the answer is no, but you might go to the GM and you might say something like, you said this is a really busy street, right, in this little thing. So are there any like restaurants or cafes on this little street? And the GM might go, oh, yeah, totally, there's a small little like pastry shop at the end of the street corner. And it's like, cool, awesome. Right now it's like, did the GM just make that up? Maybe. Should there be one there anyways? Yes. Did the GM like just forget to mention it? Sure. Sometimes the answer might be no, of course. But you have to sort of collaboratively build together and realize that one of the disadvantages of role-playing games is that you are only seeing the game through an exceptionally narrow window, which is the GM's brief description to you. And a lot of times there's this sort of amorphous environment that we only realize once we start actively asking questions and engaging with it. All right. So again, there's ideas about when you're exploring a scene, you might be asked if you're doing something difficult, dangerous, or dramatic. You might have to make an action roll. We see a roll for gathering little bits and bops, which is basically this game sort of inventory. Sounds maybe it's like a quantum inventory, but bits are biological oddities and bobs are artificial scrap. So bits and bobs are basically weird little, again, very similar to Wildsea, right? With what is it called? Secrets and ephemera. I can't remember exactly what they were called. Yeah, thank you. It's salvage and specimens. I couldn't remember what they were called exactly. It's the same thing, right? Organic, non-organic. And we'll probably be able to use those and interact with those in different mechanical ways. So, see that flower over there? I bet it's got some really cool pollen inside of it, but how to get to it? Just like when you move around, grabbing something from your surroundings is as easy as announcing that you're going to do it. However, sometimes you would roll and sometimes you would not roll. If there's an element of randomness or challenge, if there is no element of randomness or challenge to gathering a bit or a bob, you just get it. Put it straight into your carry slot and continue on. However, if getting it, right, so let's say, I don't know, well, I guess bees would be people in here. I was going to say you're trying to get some honey or something like that. I don't know. There's a box of thumbtacks precariously, stuck on top of a high desk, or you're like, ooh, I want a thumbtack. So you're gonna have to climb up there. Sounds like it might be difficult or dangerous or dramatic. So then that's when we're gonna have to roll for it. Basically reiterating what we've already said. We also have interaction. Okay, let's see. We'll keep this one short and sweet, as conversing with NPCs is the world of Pico. In World Pico, it's pretty simple. Just like any other action, striking up a conversation or shouting something to a potential ally or enemy is simply saying you're doing it. Unless the situation threatens danger, difficulty, or drama. How would a conversation invite these things? So it might be dramatic talk, difficult talk, or dangerous talk, in which case we might have to roll dice. There's a whole category of skills devoted to interacting with NPCs, known as friending skills. Yapping, swaggering, dazzling, scaring, caring, and taming. So obviously this game is putting a lot of emphasis on making friends. No problem, Magic Monk. I certainly understand that. To be important and needed, Agile Monk. Rumbling. This is the fighting. Bugs don't fight, but sometimes they do get into a rumble. Don't get us wrong here. The rumbles can cover bites and blades, but in a game of Pico, violence is optional. And these rules can also represent encounters such as a scuffle, a tense exchange of words, a deadly encounter with a beastly threat, a chase through the undergrowth, a contest of skill or strength. Could be a match of cap golf. In a rumble, you're usually working to defeat your opponent, and this means that there will be a few things. There's going to be some sort of heart track. Remember, everything in this game basically boils down to filling a track. There will be opportunities to attack and defend, and a lot of damage being thrown around, which can be enhanced or mitigated if you consider your weaknesses and your resistance. So in a rumble, we've got more tracks. Tracks on tracks on tracks. Now, to be clear... Hey, no problem, Mickey.
Mickey tipped $10. Thanks for the first look, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to get through all 360 pages, but I mean, because there's a lot of fallback, stuff here. A lot of this stuff isn't really that different than Wildsea. I mean, it's obviously portrayed differently, but... It is, again, I feel like it's still like a little unclear to me. I mean, Wildsea has this problem too, right? Which is like, the game is about playing the game. To use the Family Guy, right? Thing, it kind of insists upon itself, and it's true. It does. And I think a lot of PBTA and Blades in the Dark games insist upon themselves. And I think that this does. Any case, we have spotlight tracks, combo tracks, and heart tracks. So spotlight tracks. And Pico doesn't have an initiative system beyond whoever is doing something will probably get some spotlight next. But with actions and reactions coming in thick and fast in a rumble, it can help everyone if the Weaver keeps a spotlight track. So that's what we saw before. A spotlight track is just where you keep track of how many actions and reactions each player has made and try to keep them relatively balanced. So you don't make sure that somebody just doesn't go 18 times in a row, right? The dagger heart problem that people talk about. Heart tracks. Though most tracks are represented with little circles, just because they're easy to draw, some tracks within this book look a little different, a little heartier. A heart track works exactly the same way as any other tracks. They just look different. Why? Because they're a visual indicator that this particular track is perfect for soaking up damage in a rumble. You don't have to represent these, by the way, by drawing hearts. You'll find heart tracks on your character's aspects, and if you're a Weaver, they will be on hazards. And lastly, there are combo tracks. These let you burn off some of your boxes to set up a high damage finishing move. Teamwork is even more important in a rumble than it would be in most other scenes. So when a Weaver puts down a combo track, you should try to get some use out of it. So we saw combo tracks before, right? Where when you're trying to make progress, presumably on somebody's hazard's heart track, for example, you can burn one of your aspects to also mark a combo track. And then once that combo track is filled, you can have a really particularly large and impactful impact on the main track. Pumpkin says, I like the combo thing, but I feel like it would work better for a game trying to emulate a fighting game or battle anime, as opposed to, little bugs exploring a post-apocalyptic world. River, who has a lot more experience with these games than I do, says, the combo mechanic was added midway through the playtest. As a huge Wild Words fan, I find it kind of take it or leave it. Again, I understand potentially the problem that it is trying to solve. It not only solves the problem of, like, how do you do the wombo combo, right? And it can just kind of be very unsatisfying to just everybody help everybody else, somebody else, and then that person makes one roll on behalf of everybody. It also helps you solve the problem of, like, how do we work together to make impact on a track that we otherwise wouldn't really have much of an impact on. All right. So we have, it uses the same kind of structure, but attacking and defending kind of works the same way. If you get a 6, you have a triumph. You deal damage to your target and you hit them with an effect. If you get a 5 or 4, you deal damage or you deal an effect. Sorry, you deal damage or an effect, or you deal a mark of damage and an effect, but you also get hit with damage or an effect from your target. Disaster. Your attack misses completely, letting your target take the opportunity to both hit you with damage and an effect. So remember, we're doing a lot of double duty with these. You know, the GM isn't usually rolling. So your attack kind of represents an exchange of blows. I'm trying to figure out here. I like that it does damage and effect, and then you get to make a choice between damage or effect. I guess we just got to figure out what the effects are here specifically. Defending is, again, because the player, it's all player-facing roles, right? So if a monster, you know, if something comes in and attacks you or something like that, you're going to defend. And so, for example, if you roll a 6, your defenses are unparalleled. You turn aside whatever is incoming, and you completely ignore any damage or effects that were coming your way. On the other hand, if you got a disaster, you take the damage and the effect of whatever is aimed at you. Yes and no, Dr. Metropolis. So what this game has is it has a lot of explanation of what is essentially a very basic framework that you are going to use over and over and over again, right? So crunch, yes, but like it's not like Pathfinder 2 crunch or Mutants and Masterminds crunch, where it's like, hey, here's a list of 700 feats that you need to know what each one of these do. It's like once you kind of understand fundamentally how tracks work and how to interact with them, you pretty much have the whole game. This is just a bunch of different ways of specifically interacting with tracks in that way. Oh, here we go. Okay. So when you deal damage, anytime you're doing something, remember, because a rumble could be an argument, could be a verbal argument. So a rumble is just where the bugs are, they're getting kind of feisty. But any action that is trying to bring that rumble to a conclusion is something dealing damage, right? So damage in this is not just literally muscle and blood and guts. It is making marks on their heart track, but it covers something like make an opponent less able to keep rumbling, less likely to keep. You're like attacking their morale, It could, there we go. Look, actions that confuse or demoralizing an opponent, making it more likely that they can give up, right? So damage can be a lot of things. It's anything that's basically making it so that your opponent gives up and that you win. And again, impact is really important here. Heart tracks in a rumble are like any other track. The more impact your action has, the more boxes you're going to affect. Giga impact tends to end rumbles pretty quickly against all but the most titanic of foes. So another way to think about it is like if what someone's, you're like, oh, that this bug is actually ashamed of that they can't fly, and you're, engaging with them, and that's your angle of your action. You might have giga effect because you're being very effective at demoralizing them because their secret, right? But when you have the opportunity to deal damage, you'll almost always also have the opportunity to trade in that damage for an effect. Or if you roll really well, you'll get the damage and the effect. And while there are a few specific effects that have predefined outcomes, most of these effects are freeform. An extra bit of narrative weight to your action that changes something about you, your opponent, or the rumble as a whole. Don't discount effects just because they do not mark tracks directly. Pico is a narrative-first game for a reason. Effects, both specific and freeform, are discussed in a couple of pages. I would say tracks are prescriptive in this game. However, Mickey, I would say that the rules and the framework give you the mechanical tools to interact with those prescriptive actions or prescriptive mechanics in a way that reinforces the fiction, you know? So it's like a way of kind of having your cake and eating it too. Limits? There are no limits. In practice, any skill a bug has access to might be able to cause harm in the right situation. But the bash, slash, bite, and sizzle skills are perfect for dealing straightforward damage. But again, if you have a good plan or do something, you might be able to use a different skill from that list that we saw before. Taking damage is not quite as fun as dealing it. Playable bugs in Pico all have aspects. Like, for example, you might have the mandibles part. And we can see that this is a heart track, which is 3, and then there's a dot, and then 2. Benefit. Ignore tough cuts if you're biting other bugs. So that's what having mandibles does. Note that these aspects are your bug's most important features, and they also give you special benefits. You see that up there in the topish right bit? That's your heart track. And any damage that your bug takes goes to your aspects. And when that aspect becomes fully marked, you lose the benefits of what that aspect gives you. Your face gets ripped off. No, I'm just kidding. When a character takes damage, the player decides which aspect it gets marked to. This allows for some tactical decision-making because you can spread out your damage over a variety of aspects to keep your benefits around as long as possible. But there are 2 important rules here. The aspect you mark damage to has to make fictional sense, and you can't split damage from one source over multiple aspects. So again, it has to make sense where you're taking the damage, and it can only go to one aspect at a time. You can't divvy it up like one here, one there, one there. Marks are made left to right, and you mark it. Now note, remember before with the tracks we had that line, which is the break. You can see there's a break here at 3. So if we took 8 damage at once, the most we would be able to mark here is 3, and then we would stop at the break. Once that break is hit, ignore any other marks that would normally be made, any normally marks that would be made or ignored. So this is how the game kind of keeps it so that if like one bad roll doesn't completely, take your aspect out, you can obviously get potentially, 3 or 4 or whatever what the tracks specifically look like. I don't recall, but yes. Some hazards deal burn directly. Remember, burn is where we mark an X. And the reason why the burn is nasty is because it's a lot harder to remove these X's than it is to remove these slashes. That's because when you mark damage to an aspect, any that goes over the end of the aspect wraps back around and starts burning the hearts. Ouch. Okay. In this way, this is useful. It means that unlike most tracks, an aspect's heart track can absorb double the amount of damage if you're willing to change your marks into burns. But burn is very difficult to heal outside of a settlement, and the track being fully marked means that you have already lost access to the benefit it gains. So, kind of interesting. Now, again, your effects could be anything, right? And this is like one of those classic, like, it could be anything, and anything you come up with, and anything goes, and it could be narrative, and it could be mechanical, but, you could just come up with it and, go with the flow. Easier said than done. But they do give some specific effects here, like you might grab somebody, you might stun someone, you might pull them towards you, push you away from them. This reads like a fucking 4E D&D game, Okay, Death and Defeat. Pico is a pretty upbeat game, but not without its dark moments. Death avoided. Death in Pico is a player choice. You can die, but the mechanics don't force you to. Instead, if you fully burn out all of your aspects, you can curl up into a ball and hide for the rest of the scene. Then at the start of the next scene, you completely clear a single heart for free and can act normally again, but you're still pretty banged up. This is a standard way of things to do, but we encourage you to deal with death and avoiding it in a way that suits your table. They're your characters after all, and it's your story. I just wrote the book. You might consider having a character curl up and hide when all of their aspects are marked, rather than just being burned. You might have each character have one lucky escape, and then they suffer a permanent death the next time they're in the same situation. Or rule that fully burning an aspect removes it from that bug forever. And so death isn't a concern, but loss of power and loss of progression is. Almost like level drain. Now, everything can be really overwhelming, so here's some advice on how to play the game. If you have a lot of cuts because something's very difficult, then interact with the fiction to deal with the cuts. If you're trying to deal with something and it's really fast and it's plated in iron and the GM's giving you a speed cut and an armor cut, okay, great. So we're removing 2 dice. How am I ever supposed to hit this thing? Well, we could try to put effects onto it where its cuts aren't going to apply. Maybe you find a weak point, or you crack open a plate in its armor, or maybe you tangle up its legs so it can't move as quickly, right? These are, fictional. This is what, it's like what we call about fictional positioning, right? The advantage of Blades in the Dark, and the wild words by definition, is it gives you it's like a Rosetta Stone for being able to basically translate anything in the fiction into a very easily understood mechanical apparatus. Whereas that's harder to do in a game like D&D, because in D&D, every system is governed by its own set of subsystems, right? Spells work very differently than attacks. Movement works very differently. Climbing works very differently than attacking a monster. That monsters have hit points, and pits have their own rules, and locks have their own rules, and movement is in squares, right? Like everything works very differently. So it's very difficult to sort of figure that out. However, in this game, everything uses the same system, which is a track. And as such of it, and everything if something's hard, it's a cut. That's it. So how do you deal with the cuts? Well, you address them using the fiction by either dealing with an effect or changing your approach. If you do something differently, then you might have dealt with that cut. Now, it's a way of rewarding the player for engaging with the fiction. Can talk about like that fictional positioning. Now, you can choose aspects carefully, right? Many aspects have things in special rules that allow you to ignore a cut in certain circumstances. So this is a little bit, mechanical. Obviously, there's probably a diegetic reason that an aspect is allowing you to ignore a cut. Like we saw that your sharp mandibles allows you to ignore an armor cut if you're using your bite. So it's kind of gamist and diegetic. If there's some heavily armored, adamantine skeleton bug, and the GM gives you an armor cut, and you come in and you say, I'm going to use my razor sharp mandibles, and I'm going to cut right through it. Okay, cool. It's both kind of fictionally represented and mechanically represented. This option is just bitch to your GM. That's cool that they put in there. Again, there might be points of interest in the scene that you can call upon and use, right? So it's this idea of working in the fiction to generate outcomes, rather than just looking at your character sheet and picking the right combination of feats. It's one of the things, for example, it's one of the reasons I love like Legend of the Five Rings, because Legend of the Five Rings, you want to use the right skill and the right approach, but it really just depends on how you're describing your actions and how you're dealing with it. You're not just, picking the thing that you have the highest stat in or the most ranks in. It says, are all these rules just for rumbles? No, because while attacking, defending, taking damage, and effects works for rumbles, really they're for anything. It could be testing your strength at a carnival ride. It could be for anything. So basically, this is that situation where I was talking about where it's like it's one procedure for resolving everything in the game, right? It's this kind of infinite fractal in that way. So really, these rules are used for any sort of dangerous, high-tension situation. So we have, again, there's a bunch of chapters in this book. We're on page 70. But I just want to kind of set a tone here. So we're going to talk about montages, and we're going to talk about journeys, because I do want to see those mechanics. We'll see if we can make it, if we'll get to making a bug, because making a bug is almost 100 pages. Well, like 70 pages. And there's actually 2 chapters of making a bug. And I don't know if we're going to get to full character creation. And then obviously there's stuff for the GM, like creating your big Pico Titan that you ride around on, a GMing section, including, monsters, what they call hazards in this game. There's chapter 11, which is kind of gives you an overview of the world, kind of an atlas. And then there's cheat sheets and stuff in the back. So unfortunately, in this first look, we may not get to actually making a bug, but we'll at least understand how the game is sort of, played out. And by the way, shout out, respect. This game started with, here's the concept of this game. Then here are the basic rules for the game. Here are the 3 main play pattern spaces. We have scenes, montages, and journeys. Chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, you know the basic rules of the game. You understand scenes, montages, and journeys. Now let's make a character on page 98. Love that, right? That is,
I am strong.
teach me how to play the game before you ask me to make a fucking character. That is, for me, 10 out of 10. So the order of this game is really on point. So again, this is right up my alley in that respect. Okay, so let's take a look at least at montages and journeys, and then we'll definitely see where we're going for that. And then Adam says we can burn right through that. The pages are all basically just physical aspects of the character. Skimming through them to understand is really cool, but it wouldn't take too long. That's okay. Now, it's all bitch to GM. Yes, that's the real solution is just bitch to the GM. This is too hard. How am I supposed to kill this thing? That in my experience, by the way, somebody's going to say it. What is that? That's rulings over rules. That's OSR. That's combat is war. That's what that is. It's just bitching to the GM and being like, come on, let it work. Please. Yeah, there you go. Mickey got it right. There you go. Good job, Mickey. Question then for myself. If I teach you the words of the game, but give you characters before the rules, is this okay too? I don't mind that. I don't mind that. Like, in fact, having I actually, if I actually could improve this a little bit, I might have done a brief overview of the character sheet first with little call outs over what these different things mean. And, with maybe a page reference of, we'll get to this in, in page 50, we'll get to this in chapter 6 and understand like how these things all tie together so that because at the end of the day, right, that the character is the vessel through which I interact with the game and the game mechanics. I don't necessarily need to know how to make one until I know what the rules are, but it's also kind of useful to at least have an understanding. That's even why when we do these first looks, usually very early on, we skip ahead to like the end of the book and look at the character sheet because I want an overview of it. And I love it when games give you that like 2-page spread with, the call out boxes showing the character sheet. And it's like, hey, these are your aspects. These are important for this, this, this. We cover it in chapters 3, 5, and 7. Pages this. It's also just a great way to sort of act as like a foundational element for understanding how your character ties together. Okay, So, montages. So, to be clear, scenes are in some ways the least structured. Even though we talked about all those tracks and all that other stuff, scenes could be anything. It could be, climbing a pole, it could be chopping down a sunflower plant, or it could be, getting into a rumble, which could be a fight, or it could be a verbal argument. A montage, on the other hand, is a special type of scene. A long period condensed down into a single moment where each bug gets one spotlight, and it's a way of skipping over boring but necessary bits and getting right back into the scenes and journeys. So again, we literally, I think this is the term I use, right? Which is getting shopping, right? If camping, if you need to heal up, you're getting prepared to set out on a journey. The long action that you take during a montage is known as a task. It's basically just like a normal action. And most of the time you can pretty much just roll it the same. It's basically the same thing. You say what you want to achieve. And if it's difficult, dangerous, or dramatic, we have to roll. But there are a few special rules, but the most important rule is everybody gets one. Tell him, Peter. Everyone gets one. So everybody just gets to do one thing in a montage. And I think that's really awesome. In fact, one of my favorite house rules that Smith made back in the day when we played 4th edition D&D is he made what he called the 1-round skill challenge. And the idea was he made it so that skill challenges were just 1 round. Everybody got one turn. And it was like, okay, you contribute, you contribute, you contribute, you contribute, you contribute. 5 people went, and then you counted up, whatever you got, succeeded, successes, or whatever, how did you do in the skill challenge? And basically, it was a montage, and it worked really, really well. So I can confirm that this is a great way to run these. And to a certain extent, the One Ring does this, but the One Ring still has that potential issue where it's like they don't want to just say like everybody gets one action. Instead, it's kind of more of like a party resource. But anyways, point is, I like these rules. They worked really well for 4th edition. Now, in a free-form task, this is just where you're fucking making it up, right? If your group takes a montage, everyone can do a task. Now, some tasks are defined by the game. Things like healing and recovering from, damaged aspects, or scrounging up and acquiring new bits and bops, right? Those have specific rules. Everything else is free-form. You make it up. And again, if it's dramatic, dangerous, or difficult, we're going to roll. But otherwise, we have specific rules. And again, they work just like an action, where if you roll a 6, a 5, 4, 5, a 1, 2, or 3. Recovering, however, has its own set of rules, where basically, depending on how you do, you can clear damage from your gear, from one of your aspects, your parks. You could, if you get a 4 or 5, you clear 1 mark. And if you get a disaster, you don't clear any marks. So the disaster there is you don't get to do anything, right? That's a great question, Mickey. I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm sure that's probably part of the GMing section or something. I will also say, Mickey, that I don't mind it when the game kind of states that earlier on as well too, because again, it gives me a framework for understanding like, why, okay, these are all the things. Why do I care? But note also that when you're in a settlement, you can heal burns as easily as marks. Burns normally cannot be healed out on the road. And if you are recovering, you can use a bit or a bop and consume it to gain an advantage on the roll. You can also use your task during the montage to make a roll for someone else if you're the doctoring type. And any benefit you roll apply to that bug rather than to you. But then you're giving up your turn, right? So again, there's different rules here for healing people, for scrounging up bits and bops. And then for mysterizing. So this is a rule. This is what we use to uncovering mysteries through play. Mysterizing during a montage speeds us up dramatically. This always requires a roll, and it uses up your task. So basically, it's a way of sort of moving the moving a mystery forward. So this is where you use your task to go searching for something that might be relevant to the mystery that you're currently investigating, hoping a discovery will bring you closer to the truth. So you roll on this table and then gives it. So it's not like specifically tied to a track. It's more of just like gathering information, right? You gain a revelation, something that spurs a small discovery for you that relates to your current mystery, and you can immediately announce that small discovery. Remember, you get those discoveries before you announce a truth. In a conflict, a revelation, but not for me. You find something that doesn't speak to you, but it might be to one of your allies. Another bug in your crew can make a small discovery based on what you find if they wish. Interesting. So if you roll a 4 or 5, you advance somebody else's hunt for truth. So this is how you accumulate, at least mechanically, those little progress tracks down, discovering some new truth. And we talked about that before, right? That's kind of a way for the players to kind of take a little bit more of a narrative, almost a GM authoritative control over the world and sort of create their own version of the truth. It's a little Brindlewood Bay-y, honestly, in a way, where you're kind of investigating the mystery and then by accumulating discoveries. And then once you accumulate enough discoveries to solve the mystery, you get to kind of speak that truth. And then that is true. That is what the solution was to the mystery. So it's a little Brindlewood Bay-ish, I think, maybe. Maybe people with, maybe River or Adam who have more experience can kind of confirm or deny that. But it feels a little bit Brindlewood Bay, like where you have this kind of quantum mystery. And we may not know the answer until after we fill the track in, and then we kind of say whatever we want the truth to be to the answer to the mystery. Okay, we got cooking. Of course, we have cooking. It's a slice of life, a game here. River says, yeah, mysteries, very convergent design of car from Brindlewood, and Adam says, generally agree with those fairly broad strokes. If you want to cook, you can consume 2 or more bits and make a meal, which can give you temporary resistance. It can give you temporary skill buffs. Or it can give you a temporary undercut, which is an ability to reduce how much a cut affects you. So basically, it's a way to buff your team by cooking. And again, they all follow the same basic procedure, right? And you could do anything in a montage. A montage, in some ways, is kind of like, procedural downtime from Blades in the Dark. But in this case, just like, by the way, just in Blades in the Dark, there's technically a defined procedure for healing. There's technically a defined procedure for acquiring an asset. And then there's the generic long-term project. And it's the same thing with the montage, right? It's just, they do have some specific examples for cooking and healing and, getting discoveries for your mystery. And of course, crafting. It wouldn't be a slice of life game without crafting. So now, just like we use bits to make cook, remember bits are like organic. We use bops, which is which is bits of flotsam and jetsam to craft, and we do that to make a contraption, and a contraption lets us mimic an aspect. So basically, we can kind of temporarily gain an aspect by making some sort of weird contraption. And guess what? It's the same thing where if you get a 6, you choose an aspect that you want to copy. A prototype gives a copy of this aspect that works from the first time it's used until the end of that scene. A conflict, it means that you get something that, again, you get an aspect, you get to copy it, and it uses it once, and then it falls apart. And then if you get a disaster, you waste your bops, but you don't get anything. And yada, yada, yada. Molting. I think this is the leveling up. A very special task that becomes only useful in longer-term play. Molting allows a bug to ingest some of the nectar, capital N, that they found, which is Pico's character creation and advancement resource. So basically, we just need to ask ourselves, how do we gain nectar? And that will tell us what this game is rewarding. We spin a cocoon around ourselves and emerge with a shiny new feature. So to molt, we basically need to have a safe space. We need to have enough XP, I mean nectar. Nectar molting allows you to purchase new ranks in a skill, create a new aspect, or a new augment. And you need to know what you want. Molting shouldn't slow the game down. Remember, because you can actually do this in the middle of a, okay. All right, hey, we just got a massive super chat from our friend Sanjeev. He says, "Hey Derek, love these first looks and can't wait to see you dig into Burning Wheel." Sanjeev has talked to me about this. Sanjeev is bumping Burning Wheel to the top of the first look queue. So now that we have covered out Pico, I basically told him, I said, "Look, I got to get this Pico across before I could do that." Sanjeev, thank you. We are really digging ourselves a hole here. We are going from Stone Top to Pico, and now we are going to be doing. Now it's not really a first look because I've played Burning Wheel. I've even run Burning Wheel, not well, but I ran it. And of course, obviously, I have a lot of experience with Mouse Guard and Torchbearer, which are like Burning Wheel light. So it's not really a first look, but it's for this channel, it's a first look. It's one of those games that often gets talked about, but seldom, or often gets referenced, but seldom gets talked about, and even less often gets played. But Burning Wheel is in many ways kind of like the ultimate. Let's call it what it is. It's the ultimate indie hipster game. It has the most crazy bespoke language of any of these games. We're ripping on tracks and burns and marks and cuts. Burning Wheel takes that and dials it to 11. Burning Wheel is like this is Spinal Tap version of creating indie RPGs. You might think it's like satire, but no, Luke Crane means it. And that's what's so amazing about Luke Crane. Is it worse than Grimwild? Way worse. Way worse. Shade, Artha, Rim, Spokes, Hub. I could go on. It's a whole other thing. So it's way worse than that. Anyways, I like that they say here, you need to know what you want. Basically, they're like, look, if you want to level up in the middle of session, you can't be like, let me look through the book. Like, we're in the middle of playing, dude. Let's keep it going, Let me be right back. I just got to take care of something. All right, we're back. So if you want to advance, you need to spend a nectar. So to add a new aspect to your character as 3 nectar. To add an augment, you need 2 nectar, and to increase a skill rank, you need nectar equal to the rank you're attending. So remember, you can only get up to rank 3 in a skill. So it's 1 to get to 1, 2 to get to 2, 3 to get to 3. So 6. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. So those are montages. Again, one and done. A couple of procedural elements for stuff that's going to happen a lot. We've got cooking. We've got crafting. We've got healing. We've got mystery solving. It's kind of like and again, and even the mystery solving is, engaged with that whole idea of discovery, small discoveries and discovering truths, which again is kind of like a quantum mystery. It's not like literally exploring mysteries, which is great. All right. I don't like the art in this game. I've said this before. Again, it's good. It's got a style. It's just not my style. That being said, this little party of bugs, this is awesome. This is like a D&D party of bugs. And you know what? I'm here for it. I get it's the Playing Journeys chapter, but I'm here for it. I also don't love this font, but again, I'm just being stickler. Look, it's my channel. I'm allowed to have opinions. I don't have to love everything. Again, it's fine, but I do like this piece of art. I like this bug in the back, this like rhino beetle thing with the sword. That looks pretty cool. And I like the guy in front with the torch. I like the archer too. I guess this is supposed to be a female bug because she has eyelashes. All right. So our last of our 3 types of scenes is the one that is the most procedural, according to the rules, or what we read already, which is journeys. A journey is a special type of scene that lets you travel from one location to another. If we're just going down the road, we don't need this. But if we're setting off on a large jaunt, these are the big ones. The dangerous roads from settlement to settlement, the search for dungeons in the distance, the dense forest, or the hunt for a predator that you've sworn to bring to justice. Like montages, these run on different rules than moment to moment. Time and distance are suddenly important, and Pico Titans will have the large impact on play, even the newest Pico Titan speeding progress significantly. That's a great question. We will find out if this is travel, journey, or exploration. So we have roles. So we're familiar with this. We've been playing the One Ring. You could have the Weaver decide, or you could have a system of, I did it last time, so I'm choosing you to do it this time. Whatever it is, every now and then, a player's bug might be specifically very good at dealing a specific role. And if you have strengths, why not play to them? Light and weather. With time-based mechanics that Journeys introduce, light level and current weather come into play. You'll find rules for light and weather at the end of this chapter. So here are the basics of travel. We either go on foot, covering huge distances, stopping to camp, grilling tasty bits over a fire, telling stories, or we go the faster route. We get a Pico Titan and we travel, a huge, helpful creature that's strong enough to carry little bug houses on their back, the height of mobile luxury. So basically, we get normal journeying, and we get this game's version of your, what were they called? They're called cutter ships. I can't remember what they were called in Wildsea. It's basically a boat. It's basically an airship. It's except in this game, it's a little house strapped to the back of a cat or a ferret or something. And why go on journeys? Well, obviously for all these reasons. Now, journeys in Pico usually need a destination, a physical place you're headed to, but sometimes venturing out on a journey with nothing but a nebulous goal is mine. So technically, we are already, if we have a destination, it is not exploration, okay? It is either a travel or journey. Now, remember, in travel, we know the destination and we know the route. In journey, we know the destination, but we're not quite sure what the route is going to be. So let's see what we have here. Distance and time. Distance is measured in strides, and guess what? The journey gets boiled down to, you guessed it, a track. The Weaver will set a journey track, and this is very similar to the Wildsea, obviously. 1 box is 1 stride. When all the boxes are marked, the journey is over. Each day in Pico is split up into 8 ticks. 4 is during the day, 4 of them is during the night. The Weaver will also set, in addition to the journey track, they will set a ticking clock, a physical representation of passing time with half circles marked above and below the track. I don't know why we need to do all this, but early in-game sunrise, the marks on the ticking clock are erased and a new day begins. Some benefits, and I'm not erasing that. So here we go. All right. So again, this is very procedural and very beat. This is like the most board gamey thing that we've seen yet. In fact, it's not quite. I mean, I wonder if it's like you have so many. Adam says, who's been playing this game a lot, I mostly disregard these rules and just make journeying a simple track. And I could see why. I mean, it just seems like a lot of mechanics for this, But, we have here very like you pick a leader and then they have to pick, do we ramble, do we march, do we wait, or do we camp? And so like if you ramble, you cover 1 stride in 1 tick. But if you march, you cover 2 strides in 1 tick. If you wait, you waste a tick. And if you camp, you take 2 ticks, but you get to do a montage scene where, you know, the bugs can maybe recover from damage or work on or cook little stuff in, you know, in their camp scene. So the leader gets to basically pick, do you ramble, do you march, do you wait, or do you camp? What is everybody else doing? Well, they're all on lookout, keeping their eyes open, if they have eyes. And so basically, the leader is the most important person. And that's why they said maybe you know, change on this, you know. But River says, every major Wild Words game has a journey system, but none of them use the same rules. Even Eternal Ruins handles this differently. River says, Felix hasn't quite cracked the code on this yet. He wants to rework it for Wildsea too. So basically you have to choose, like, do you take the safe, slow road, which is 1 for 1? Note that you can't be surprised. If you march, you get to do 2 units in 1 tick, but you could be surprised. If you wait, I don't know why you would wait, but you can't be surprised, and you get to make a lookout roll, which is the same as rambling, so I don't know why you would ever wait instead of ramble. And then camp is, obviously, you're not going to make any progress, but it takes a lot of time, but the advantage is you get a montage scene so that you can spend a task and maybe cook some new food, work on your little contraption, heal some damage that you've taken. And that might be a factor that you need to do. I mean, the board gamist in me thinks that this is kind of clever and interesting. It is a little unfortunate that basically one person makes all these decisions and everybody else is just looking out, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, that's if you're on foot. If you're traveling by Pico Titan, ramble goes to 2, march goes to 4, and they are also very safe. If you choose to wait or camp, you can decide that your band will use your Pico Titan's den, the little house on top of them. If you do, you can ensure that you can't be surprised, as your Pico Titan will notice and warn you. So you basically don't need someone to look out. So guess what? If you want to travel a long distance, you better have a Pico Titan. And if you want to have a safe camp while you're out in the woods, build a little house onto the back of your cat, I guess. I saw before earlier that poll. How many people we got watching this? This is crazy. 54 is not bad. So I'm going to do a poll here really quick. Let me find my poll. Graphical poll. All right. Which Pico Titan would you pick? I think we saw earlier. What page are we on? 87. Where are the Pico Titans? Here we go. Here we go. Cats, foxes, otters, or raccoons. Fox. All right. Poll is up. Which Pico Titan would you pick? A cat, a fox, an otter, or a raccoon? The important question is being asked. All right. So again, it says, you thought the leader was going to have all the fun? It kind of sounds like they do. But every bug that isn't the leader is on lookout. And mechanically, bugs that are on lookout get to make a lookout roll whenever the leader chooses to march, ramble, or wait. Each bug that goes on lookout gets to roll 2d6 minus the lookout roll. Oh, gets to roll 2d6, the lookout roll. The results of this roll determine what the bug notices as they move around. So basically, it's like a random encounter generator. So every bug that isn't on leader gets to basically make a random encounter. So if you roll double 6s, you get an unexpected landmark. If you roll double 5s, you find a trove of stuff. If you roll double 4s, you find an event that's going on. If you get double 3s, a change in the weather. A double 2s, an NPC. And double 1s, a looming hazard is coming. So basically, you have a 1 in 6 chance of generating one of these. Or you have a 1 in 6 chance of generating, or I guess a 6 in 36 chance of rolling one of these things. So each of these is a 1 in 36 chance. Ooh, I thought cat was going to be much higher than it is here, but I respect the fox. There's a park near my house. Actually, I live next door to a park, but there's a park that's a little bit further down, which I actually like. I actually prefer to walk through that park. Number one, it's closer to my Starbucks. I'll typically go there before or after I get coffee. And I like it a little better because it's a little bit more shaded, and it's called Gully Brook. And it's actually kind of like it's got bad cell reception, which I kind of like actually. But it's kind of like down in a ravine or a gully, I guess, since it's Gully Brook. And it's a really nice little, even though it's kind of urban, it's very, very undeveloped because of the terrain. Anyways, a lot of foxes in there, and I see foxes all the time. And I sometimes feel bad because I'll see them, and they'll have like, a snake or a little chipmunk or like a little squirrel or something in their jaws. But they're cool. They're cool to see them. And somebody said that foxes are like what is it? Cat software running on dog hardware, and I think that's kind of a cool way to describe foxes. Anyways, I also think raccoons are cool. Yeah. Anyways, I have a raccoon story. If you guys want to hear a raccoon story, fun times, raccoon stories. All right, here we go. Raccoon story. All right. My friends and I in our 20s, and I guess into our 30s. Not really though, but yeah, sort of. We used to go camping in the summertime. We would all go, with tents, and we wouldn't go like primitive camping. We'd go to like a campground where like you're in a tent, but there's like an outhouse down the road, like an actual shower house, a bathhouse, with running water and stuff like that. And we did kind of not quite glamping. We didn't full glamp, but it wasn't middle of nowhere. Anyways, point is, it was camping. But we'd go, we'd hang out, we'd play music, we'd play games, we'd, during the daytime, we'd play kickball or croquet or throw balls and mitts and baseballs around. Anyway, drink at night, have fun. Well, we were staying one night, and we all went to bed, a little drunk, and I had bought these containers of, I bought these containers of nuts. And they had these like screw top lids. They were like emerald nuts. And that night we heard this like horrific racket. It was like, it was horrific. And, something was like, oh my God, what's that? I go, I think it's raccoons. And it, I didn't know what was going on. And, we were fighting, there was squabbling, and we come out the next morning and we see that one of the nut containers had been left out. And had the screw top lid, and it apparently the raccoons had been fighting over it, and eventually they had gotten the lid off. But before that, it was covered in bite marks and whatever, because they were trying to get at the nuts, but they couldn't figure it out. So eventually, after just biting on it and ripping on it and pulling on it, eventually the lid was all chewed up, and it had hundreds of little scrapes and marks and bite marks, and eventually they obviously cleaned it out because the whole thing was completely empty. Well, we thought it was really funny and hilarious. So the next night, on purpose, we set, one of the containers out because we had bought like a big pack of them. We set one of these little canisters with the screw top lid, and we left it out on the picnic table, and we went to bed. And we're all like, and then we fell asleep. We didn't hear anything. And I went, oh, damn, then I guess the raccoons didn't come back. No, they did come back. And when we went out the next morning, there was the container empty. Not a nut left. They'd ate them all. But this time there were no marks. Even like the plastic, like the wrapping on the nut container was unmarred. And the lid just had like 2 little teeth marks. So as far as we could tell, the raccoons the previous night had figured out how to open it. And so then when they came back the next night, there was no getting upset about it. They just grabbed it, used their mouth, opened it, and ate all the nuts. And like, because like even like the packaging, the wrapping was not touched. It wasn't shredded or anything. But it was the previous night, it would rip to hell. And I was like, God damn. So props to raccoons. They're cool. All right. Now, of course, again, I love the casualness of this, by the way. So keep in mind, every player that isn't the guide is going to roll 2d6. And that's what happened on this leg of the journey. Okay. And, you know, nobody might roll doubles, but you also might get two people who roll doubles. Somebody might get an event in progress, right? Bugs have a habit of wandering into situations that probably shouldn't concern them. And you also might get a trove of stuff, right? And then very casually, after you've made your lookout rolls, it's the Weaver's job to tie those results into the fiction of the game. It's just, you know, and it's one of those like, okay, easier said than done, right? You know, okay, you got a event in progress and a trove of stuff. Figure it out. What is it? What is the event? What is the trove of stuff? How are they related? Connect them together. Add it to the fiction. Make a good encounter of it. Like, okay, easily done. So, I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. Like, that's tough. It's tough. Very cool. Choice or encounter. So, by the way, so basically they say, and this is, you know, this is kind of like a move theory, but like, some of them might give you a choice and others will be with an encounter. And it says, you know, some lookout results will prompt the Weaver to give you a choice. Right. Basically, it's like, you know, tell them the consequences and ask. Right. It's like kind of a PBTA move. Note that choices is that they're made in place of an encounter. So basically, instead of having an encounter, you just give them a choice. You know, it's like playing Slay the Spire. Sometimes the encounter is just make a choice. Like, you know, maybe do you want this good thing or this good thing? Or do you want this bad thing or this bad thing? There's no role. There's no like gameplay to it. It's just make a choice. An encounter is a scene that plays out while in the midst of the other scene. And it could involve action rolls, challenges, hazards. Basically, it's a full-on random encounter. You know, they make a motion here that choices are a bit like a montage. Basically, you know, like, do you take the high ground or the low ground? All right, keep going. Whereas an encounter can, you know, be a whole sub feature within this feature. So we got surprise rolls, and then here is the Weaver's roll on this, because once the lookout rolls make their 2d6 rolls, the spotlight passes back to the Weaver. They have two jobs to do every time a travel action is chosen. By the way, if our track, I'm not trying to diminish this, but if the track is, say, 6 long and our group is rambling, which means they're moving one space at a time, you're going to be doing this like, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Right? And so, you know, this could be a lot of time, and it could be, you know, but on the other hand, someone might not roll anything. Right. It's another interesting, weird thing, which is like the more people in your party, the more likely that you're going to have an encounter. So that's kind of interesting in that respect. Adam says, I sent you a message on Discord, a defense of my love for this game that cannot be contained in a mere 200-word YouTube comment. Thank you for showing this game off. I really love it. I mean, again, I could get where people might get turned off by a game like this, but I love the idea of creating a strong mechanical framework that then says, here's how you map anything to it. Blades in the Dark does this. Another game that does this really well, I think, in my opinion, is Legend in the Mist, which is the reason why I think that game is really cool. Except Legend in the Mist leans more towards the fate side of things, whereas, you know, this game is obviously leaning more into the Blades in the Dark style of things. Interesting story about fate, by the way. I read something that says like that, according to Fred Hicks, who runs Evil Hat, like they basically said like they're never going to reprint Fate again or something, or they're never going to publish Fate again or something. I can't remember exactly what he said. I kind of half read it on Reddit. Go figure. But apparently they're just like, there's no money in it and nobody wants Fate anymore. Which is, John B, if you're out there and you're listening, I'm sorry. You'll have to leave a comment. Let me know what you think, John. If for some odd reason John watched this. Okay, so in addition to doing everything that we've already discussed, okay, the Weaver, the Game Master, also potentially has an optional thing, which is to add special results to the journey. And the second being mandatory, which is to describe your progress. So if all of that wasn't enough, okay, the Weaver can also add special results during every section of travel. Things that might be happening in the world. The results could be added at random. They could be added in secret. They could be added semi-randomly. They could be added with the aim of telling an unfolding story that you might have in mind. Again, it's a lot to put on the pressure of people. But you also should describe the progress. And I cannot stress this enough. You may have watched, and I'm not saying like I'm like the world's greatest GM. But if you watched, we just started doing our actual play. The One Ring has journey rules. If you just turn a journey into a series of procedural dice rolls, it will die. Every RPG at its core is a series of procedural dice rolls, even combat. But combat has pretty significant stakes, and I think there's a really easy way to map, what's going on to some imagination, right? A sword strike is easy to imagine, even if you're just doing the game element of I attack with my sword. Journeys are an area where, I hate to say it, but you have to learn to be good at painting, right? Describing the environment and painting a picture. I think more so than in almost any other circumstance, this is an area where, as the GM, you need to be a bit of a narrator, a bit of a painter, and learn to bring a certain vividness without being too long-winded. So this is, I think, one of the most difficult aspects for game masters. And it's one that, I myself, I think can struggle with from time to time. Now, I will freely admit, if you go back and watch that One Ring is probably some of the easiest that I would ever have, because in my mind, I can close my eyes and I can see these places in Middle Earth. So I am not making it up. I'm just describing it to you because I already know what it is. But there's different roles for the game master that we've talked about this in other we've talked about this in other streams, but there's different roles for the game master, and sometimes it's to be a project manager, and sometimes it's to be a referee, and sometimes it's to be a dispute settler, right? So there's always different roles for the GM. And so one, though, because I'm looking for the results in my Discord, we did a poll. I kind of made this list of what I thought the roles of the GM were. And unfortunately, I have all our March Madness results I have to scroll through. And I said, what is the thing that you yourself struggled the most with from the purpose of a GM? Like, what are the things that you struggle with the most? And, I said, so is it referee? Is it as a builder creating a world? Is it as a facilitator? No, the number one were being a director. Well, number 2 was being director, and number 1 was being a narrator, which I used as describing and bringing the fiction to life. And director is framing scenes and pacing the session. And I think Journeys really put both of those skills to the test, because it's not just about painting and bringing the fiction to life. It's also about making sure that the pacing feels correct. and that you're doing a good job of setting up a scene, basically, like a director would. And again, I think that's really an important, tough skill, and it's something that I'll be honest with you, I wish I knew how to do. I'd love to do a GM series where I just cover those different elements of what I think, makes up a good game master. But the truth of the matter is, while I think I do okay at being a narrator, in terms of, description and bringing the fiction to life, I don't know that I can teach it. I don't know if it can be taught. To be clear, to be honest with you, I don't really know. So I don't know that I have an exact answer in that respect. So it's interesting. I don't know. Anyways, point is, it's tough. It's tough. Now this is there's another element of travel, which is the weather, and the weather affects a bug's mood, and we haven't really even talked about mood. We saw it on the character sheet. But the mood is apparently a whole other system that can be affected by the weather. And here are the different weather systems. Again, this is very board gamey. It's very, very procedural. And these actually have mechanical effects, like if it's a heat wave, so this might be why you might choose to wait, right? Because it's a horrible rainstorm, or it's a cold snap and you don't want to travel. Oh, I also forgot that in addition to weather, there's daylight and darkness. So we've got a lot of rules. So the journey rules are quite in depth. Again, we didn't get through all of them, but yeah, we did basically get through all of it, but this is a very mechanical thing. And you even heard from Adam, who was running this game, they kind of tend to maybe skip this a little bit, because it is a little bit complicated, and maybe your group doesn't want to deal with that. So here is the making a bug chapter. Now, we're not going to get super deep into it, but I do want to, it does say spending your nectar. And it says, if this is your first time, skim through this chapter, understand the process, spend your nectar on augments, and then decide. All right. 2 whole chapters, spending nectar or making choices. All the nectar spending is in this chapter. All the other choices are in the next chapter. So this is basically the mechanical part of building your character, and I'm guessing the next part is sort of like the just choice. So you start with larva bugs start with 25, imago bugs start with 50 nectar. Basically, I think if you start basically as a little thing or a more advanced character. So you get 50 nectar. Again, an aspect costs 3 nectar. Augments, each aspect can have 2 augments, and each augment costs 2. And then skills cost 1 for rank 1, 2 for rank 2, which would mean 3 total, and then 3 for rank 3, which would be 6 total. But you can't even start with rank 3 as a starting character, so that's not an option. And here, finally, that's fine. They finally show the character sheet, but it is in this chapter. So here we have it. So again, we can see here the character sheet makes a little bit more sense now. Right, we can see that you have your aspects, and remember, aspects can also take damage, and the aspects will give us not only a descriptive, but they also give us a mechanical benefit. And as they take damage from a brawl or a scrap or whatever it's called, I can't remember already, they potentially can get marked, and then if the aspect gets fully marked, we lose access to that aspect. Additionally, we have our skills. We can see that there's moving skills, 6 of them, 6 friending skills, 6 finding skills, rumbling. That's the word, rumbling. And we have 6 rumbling skills. Now, while anything could technically be used for anything, obviously, if you're talking with people and trying to, ingratiate yourself with them, the friending skills are probably going to come up a little bit more than any of the other ones. Now, here's our bits and bops. And remember, we know that like bits are used, for example, for cooking. Bops are used for crafting. We can also use them in recovery and helping speed along recovery. If we use bops to make crafting, that'll create a new creation. If we use bits to create a meal, that can give us access to a temporary aspect that we can maybe use for an entire scene or just once. The mystery is where we, again, have a question. We make these discoveries, which we can do both through play and through our montage sequence. And once we have 3 discoveries, we basically get to answer the mystery. So it's not even that the GM tells us the answer. we answer our own question. And in doing so, we establish a truth, capital T. Basically, we get to decide the answer to our own mystery. And in doing so, we get to kind of shape and guide and craft the world. The only thing that I have no idea what it does yet is mood. Now, it looks like some sort of balance track, but we do have this mood track that looks like it goes between the left side and the right side, but we haven't really discussed that, and it hasn't really come up yet. Okay. But it'll be addressed. Nope, it doesn't even get a number. Everything else here gets a number, but apparently this doesn't get it. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I did see this. Sorry, there was a super chat. Trek, we were talking about Fate not getting published anymore, and Trekkie said, a strange fate for Fate. John says, a fate met its fate. Yes, it is a strange fate for Fate, but not really. I think Fate is one of those games that has always struggled to sell well because it's really free and it's kind of basic, and it's like, I don't know a lot of people who really use any of the other books. Yeah, so I don't know. Mickey says it's like retired. They're keeping it as print on demand and PDF. But Fate Condensed might stick around, but Fate Core is out of print. Yeah. Cavallo says, I discovered Legend in the Mist because of you. I love it and still do, but after playing it, it kind of falls off a little bit in my heart. Interesting, Cavallo. Sometimes that happens. You know, sometimes a game, you know, it doesn't play as well as it reads, you know? Yeah. Well, River Ray, I will say this. Stone Top may be that game. I mean, the game is very basic, really, but it's somehow 600 pages. So, so much advice and about how to run PBTA. So it's the closest that we've seen that we've gotten to it. But yeah, it's like a point-buy system, right? You get the nectar and then you spend it. Femo Nemo says, well, I learned how to put a misdeed opportunity inside the hunter role in the One Ring, thanks to your deer scene in the first episode. Perhaps there is no theory, but you can learn from example. Well, that is what I try to do, right, with my actual plays. You know, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, in this case, it's an actual play. We're just playing. I'm not Matt Mercer. You know, I'm not Laura Bailey. So I'm not going to be able to entertain you like a seasoned, trained actor. But if I can make it a little bit entertaining and educational and try to point out these things to you and give you examples of how I do something and why I'm doing it, then I will. That's how I think I can benefit from it the most. Yeah, I've not read the Warden Operations Manual, so I will take your word for it. Okay. So finding more nectar. All right, so this answers the third. This is the big three, right, Jared Swarmson? So how do we get more nectar? Nectar found during play is essentially a gift from the GM, a reward for besting a challenge or completing a session. It cannot be gathered or scoundreled up. It's far too powerful to out, but it might be given out after you defeat a difficult foe, after you close an important arc of the story, after a particularly daring or complex plan works, or surviving a tough situation. When nectar is gained, all bugs gain the same amount. You could run a game with varying power levels from bug to bug, but the rules as written, everybody gets the same amount. 1, 2, or 3 globs of nectar per session is usually perfect. So that is the option. If it suits your group, the Weaver might also hand out nectar at the end of every session. This ensures bugs will be constantly growing and changing as they adventure. If you're going to do this, we recommend that you don't give out more than 1 or 2 nectar during the session if you're also giving it out as mid-session, at the end of the session, and no more than 3 to 4 if you're giving out only at the end of the session. So basically, like for example, Fabula Ultima. In Fabula Ultima, you base rules, you get 5 XP every session. But you also earn XP for spending your Fabula points. You also earn XP when the GM spends Ultima points. And in this way, technically, even if you do nothing, right, the characters still advance. So it's kind of like a mix between the two of them. And I'll be honest with you, I would probably use both of these. It's a way of saying, look, We're here to play, and just by showing up and being part of the game, you're going to gain growth. And in fact, if I have a house rule that I might implement in the One Ring, you get 3 skill points and you get 3 adventure points automatically per session for playing. But there's no incentive for you to like accomplish something or do something. And so there's a part of me that kind of wants to be like, I think it should be more like you automatically get 2 and 2. I still like the idea that you get something just for showing up and playing. And that way there's always a sense of advancement. I think that's important. But I would like it for maybe be like 2 and 2, and then provide opportunities where the characters, if they, let's say, maybe if they get extra adventure points if they, survive or defeat or whatever, a combat. They get extra skill points, an extra skill point if they overcome a journey or a conflict, a council. And then maybe an additional adventure point if they, really play their character well or something like that. But like, or as a group or something. Anyways, just I like incentives. And so while this is pretty basic stuff, it's still the idea that you are rewarding them for both overcoming difficult obstacles, just surviving a tough spot, or coming to a milestone is what we would typically call this. So it's not really it's not like say Dragonbane or Forbidden Lands, where it's like, did you fight a monster, did you build a stronghold. It is a bit more milestone coded, right? Because it really even says it's kind of up to the GM, and giving out a couple per session, whatever feels right. And so it does feel a little milestone coded. And to be clear, I generally feel like this is a pretty weak methodology for handling. I just don't, not because it doesn't work. It can work just fine. I just don't think it incentivizes a specific type of play. Other than, I guess do stuff that the GM, right? Because I mean, theoretically, if you weren't getting constant growth, if your group didn't defeat any difficult foes, if you didn't really accomplish anything major in the story, if you didn't do anything daring, if you didn't survive a particularly rough or tough situation, the GM would be like, you get 0. So you didn't advance. So, I mean, I guess as long as like you kind of get a sense for what the GM is rewarding you for, because it's not like a situation where it's like you play for a while and then the GM says, level up. That's the worst kind of milestone, in my opinion. Anyways. So here's some examples of aspects. We're not going to get into them, but there's 3 types of aspects in the game. There's parts, which are like literally part of your insect. There's gear, and there are buddies, little friends that travel with you along the way. And we can see that each has its own track of how it works. And we also see that they all give you a benefit. Gear hammer. The first attack you make with a gear hammer in each scene deals giga damage. Sounds cool. Whereas if you have a glad pole, you ignore tough cuts imposed by lackeys. Ponder says, I mean, isn't that incentivizing that specific style of play? Well, it's incentivizing the specific style of play of, I guess, make your GM happy. I don't know. So, but, yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of keywords. Now, here's the thing. It's like, it both matters and it doesn't matter, but yeah, I mean, ignore tough cut when packing with bite. Okay, what is that? Well, you have to know what a cut is. You have to know what a tough cut is, and you have to know what bite is. Well, bite's a skill, and a cut is a universal mechanic that removes a d6, or the highest rolled d6 from your pool. And tough is one of the 5 types of cuts that is generically describing why something is difficult. But yeah, it's keyword soup. But that's because the game has mechanics. It's not just fluffy bullshit. It actually has mechanics. So, Anyways, so we have augments as well. Aspects are pretty good, but what we're aiming for is amazing. Augments are special extras that are added to an aspect. They make the heart track longer, so it's like leveling up your aspect. And they add new benefits and maybe some drawbacks as well. Each augment also has an additional pseudoscientific name for your bug. Okay. Each aspect can have a maximum of 2 augments attached, and once they're on there, they're there to stay. The augments add extra hearts and breaks to the aspect's track, and their benefit is pinned under that aspect. So, for example, we have mandibles. Well, you can add crushing as an augment to them, and now we have crushing mandibles. Note that this adds a heart to our track. So crushing mandibles was 2 hearts, break, heart. Well, now it's 2 hearts, break, 2 hearts. And now we get an additional benefit. We can burn another keyword. We can burn one of our hearts to treat a bite as a gigabyte for an action. Now, that might be keyword soup, but if you've been paying attention, you understand that's pretty cool. I mean, ignore tough cut and get a gigabyte. That's pretty cool. By the way, this is also why Giga isn't completely broken. Remember, Giga completely fills the track, but it still stops at a break, right? So even if we got hit with a Giga effect, our crushing mandibles would only mark the first 2 tracks. And then if we got hit with a second Giga, it would fill in the next 2, right? So that's what's cool about the breaks, is that they prevent the Giga from just immediately taking something out. The next 36 pages and beyond that are all just lists of aspects and augments, and we are not going to go through this. So Adam was correct. But, here is a bunch of advice if you want to make a stink bug or a scorpion, like what you might take. This is nice because you're like, I really want to be like a cool cockroach dude. I'm imagining like this kind of like hard Scrabble cockroach that is just this like, kind of gross, disgusting bug. And it's like, okay, maybe take chitin layered hard shell, hexapod, and broomtenna. Anyways, so here are all sorts of aspects for your mouth. And here are aspects and augments to that. Like you could have a venomous megamaw, or you could have a messy grinders. Here are suckers. I mean, you're bugs. I mean, what do you want? Peepers. Again, not eyes, but peepers. You have compound eyes. You have many eyes. Hollow optics. Bulging eyes. Sensitive eyes. Weeping eyes. Cute eyes. Shell. Slime. Feelers. Scuttlers. Is this legs? Yeah, legs. Okay. Grippers. Wings. Glands. Tails. This is a very long list. All right, so there we go. So I guess you can make as many different types of crazy ass bugs as you could possibly imagine, because every aspect can then be modified by up to 2 augments. And then, and the build, we're not even done yet, sorry. The build of your bug. Are you a big bug, small bug, a swarm of bugs? The brain of your bug. Okay, now we're getting into, those are just parts. Everything that we've been doing so far is just parts. Now, here are companions. Mounts. And then we get into gear. We have tools. We can have a backpack, a bag, duct tape, trash kit, twig baton. We have weapons. We have, clothing, like a hat, goggles. And then we finally get into the skills. And again, their skills are moving, friendly, finding, and rambling. 6 in each. So in all, there's 24 skills. And by the way, just a good tip of advice is it's a good idea to have at least one good skill from each category. That way you can do something for finding, something for talking, something for moving, and then something for getting into a rumble, which is good advice in general. And again, we get into there's actually a kind of a little bit of building aspect to this. This is a little bit more gamey than I thought, right? It talks about look at your aspects and your augments. There's a reason that we had you pick these first before you pick your skills. Think about the cool stuff that you want to do. Make sure you take skills to pick them up. Think about your team composition. Is something missing or lacking? And try to dabble in each category. Make sure that you have something from each of the 4 categories so that you can always kind of do something. And then here's just a description of all the 24 skills. And then in chapter 7, we have to and then in chapter 7, we get to choose our moods, our bits and bops that we start with, our initial mystery, and then we name our bug, and then we're done. So now we get to finally see what this mood does. Okay, mood. In Pico, I'm curious about this because this is definitely something I know. So in mood, it's kind of reminding me of balance track, which I love it. Each bug has 3 moods: a positive, a negative, and neutral. Positive and negative moods are unique to each bug, but the middle mood is the same on every character sheet. Knowing your mood helps you role play your bug, but it also has some mechanical weight. Each positive and negative mood has a drawback or benefit associated with it, giving you some extra power or making life a little bit more difficult. Mood is represented by a set of 5 boxes. The mood track only ever has 1 mark on it, your current mood. It either moves to the right or to the left. Mood changes over the course of the game session depending on your narrative and your bug's aspects. If it helps, think of it as a tug of war between the best and worst sides of your nature. Bugs begin in the middle, which is neutral. The positive mood is added to the box on the far right. The negative mood is added to the box on the far left. We've got an example mood track below. Neutral. There aren't any specific rules aligned with the mood. You're just the baseline. Positive. When your mood marker is in the rightmost box of your mood trap, your bug is blessed with the effects of a positive mood. Positive moods have nothing more to them than a beneficial bonus, so there's no harm in aiming for a good time while out adventuring. This bug's positive mood is determine, which lets their player re-roll 1 result once per scene. Lets their players re-roll results of 1 on the D6 once per scene. Negative mood, when your box goes all the way, your mood marker goes all the way to the left, your bug is cursed with the effects of a negative mood. Negative mood comes with both a benefit and a drawback, so they have to be handled carefully. This bug's negative mood is grumpy, which makes friending people harder, but makes fighting more impactful. So, a bug's moods might be chosen at character creation, but how it moves is during the game. Weather might make your mood change. Making a discovery might make your mood change. You might win a fight. That could make your mood change. You might find a really cool location. Could make your mood change. Or you could finish part of a story, which could make your mood change. And then I think we have a list here of moods. Yeah. And again, I'm sure you could probably come up with your own, but or maybe you have to pick from this list. I actually don't know. No, you got to pick from this list. Okay. I like this. We're all right in the end. The other big mood changer is simple but useful one. If you have a montage and you just use it to sleep, it always pulls your mood towards neutral. So basically, if you're in a grumpy mood, it makes you neutral. And if you're in a happy mood, it pulls you down towards neutral. Using a task to sleep always makes you move towards neutral. So basically, if you're really happy and excited, well, eventually that starts to fade away. And if you're in a shit mood, turns out this too will pass and it just starts to fade away. So over time, you naturally sort of, result in the 5, towards neutrality. All right. What positive mood are we going to pick for our imaginary and pretend bug? We've got this is positive.
Scott if tipped $15. I find the game mechanics intriguing, but I'm not feeling the bug theme.
I'm just going to pick a couple ones because I can't put them all here. All right. I think that's enough. Maybe. Let's see. All right. The poll is up. What positive mood should we pick for our bug? Hey, Scotty. Sorry I missed your tip, man. Oh, you just tipped. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Well, I mean, the game mechanics, Scotty, are very similar in some ways to the mechanics from Wildsea. I would say that they're pretty generic. The wild words system. The bug theme is it is definitely something. I mean, again, they did not mark. You just put the number. Ponder. That's how you vote. It is. It is. I mean, I do think this is a gamist game. To be clear, for sure. I don't think it's. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a narrative element, but it's definitely a gamist game. My thought about this is it's hard to pass up jaunty. My thought about this. Keep the poll up there. Keep voting. Here we go. My thought on this is it's very similar to selling people on this. Right. So some people see, mice with swords and they just nope the fuck out, and they just and part of the appeal for Mouse Guard outside of obviously the fun, silly, I mean, I guess the fairy tale-ness of it, the whimsicalness of it, right, of being Mouse Guard. Now, of course, is that the idea of Mouse Guard, of course, is I've talked about this a lot. It's kind of one of my guiding principles of RPGs is, it matters not what you fight, but what you fight for. And part of the core idea of Mouse Guard is the idea that, you're not superhero mice. You're just mice. And there's this kind of it's hard for anybody to be brave, but it's really hard for a mouse, to be brave because you're not. It's like in Mouse Guard, you're still kind of a mouse, and so being a mouse and the mechanics of Mouse Guard when it comes to your mouse nature and kind of fighting against your mouse nature in order to do these big heroic things, it feels more meaningful. It feels more impactful because the life of a mouse is a fleeting and passing thing. So there's there's some sort of meta statement to be made about it. But at the end of the day, I think it's just it's fantasy and fun and whimsy. It's not like anything that's super important. At least I don't think so. I mean, you could have different thoughts here, but okay, it looks like we're going to be driven. Okay, so people want driven after 4 votes. Let's see. When you begin a montage, roll a d6. Ooh, on a 4, 5, or 6, you gain an additional task to use. That's pretty cool. I mean, the whole rule of montage is you get 1 task. If you're driven, you get 4, 5, and 6. You have a 50% chance of getting 2 actions during downtime. Yeah, River, I could see adjacent to Mouse Guard. River Ray says adjacent to Mouse Guard, no game better conveys the tenets of OSR than Mouse Ritter, making you play as mice going up against snakes and owls. It's far easier than unlearning being warriors and mages going up against dragons and thinking you're win. Right? It really sets the tone of no, you're a mouse and this is an owl, and I don't it's crazy. It is. I think most people kind of intuitively understand. Oh, I'm a mouse. That's an owl. I'm fucked. Whereas a lot of people, maybe from video games or whatever, years of D&D, they're like, oh, I'm a human and that's a dragon. Who cares, right? No big deal. So yeah, I mean, there is a benefit to be had for having the, that sort of that change in mindset. Okay. So this gets into the inventory and, carrying stuff. I'm not going to really get into this too much, but you can start with remember, bits are like organic matter and bobs are like items, like, the edge of a knife, a paper clip, a thimble, or a single olive, or some frog sweat, or a shard of candy. We've talked about mysteries a bunch. So every mystery has 3 points and a circle. These are the black lines. You can't miss them. But there's also the gray points that connect them together. As a bug investigates a mystery, every small discovery fills in one of the gray lines, connecting the triangle together. Once all of the points are connected, a bug can choose to make a grand discovery, learning a truth about the world and filling in the circle. Congratulations, mystery solved. So your mystery might be like, how many roads must a bug walk down, right? And again, it's really it's a quantum mystery that you are creating and answering, and then whatever you discover is true in the game world. It's a way of like mechanizing player narrative control, which is kind of interesting. How does a tree fit inside of an acorn? And then eventually you create a truth. So, for example, as you play the game and mechanically make small discoveries, you write down, not all trees are big, and so you fill in one of the things. Acorns do drink a lot of water, so you fill in another one. And then eventually you fill in all three, and then you make a grand discovery. So Swift has always been fascinated by the trees. He knows they come from acorns, but how did they get in there in the first place? After 3 small discoveries, he's finally ready to announce his grand discovery to the group. Acorns have tiny micro trees in them, and they burst into full trees when they're given enough water. The group agrees this makes sense, and the Weaver notes this truth down. There you go. So grand discoveries literally changed the world of Pico, giving the players and the Weaver a new truth to fold into their story. So you could have it be flippant and, whimsical, or you could even have it be, maybe a little bit more practical, like where is the location of the Great Bug Temple, or something like that. And you could make it up and you can add it. And again, it talks about here about, you need sort of tacit approval from the other players and the Weaver. You can't invalidate somebody else's choice. I discovered that your character's dead. Oh, and they should also fit the tone of your story, right? Like if you guys are being kind of wonky and wacky and silly, maybe make something wonky and wacky and silly. But regardless, the truth, once you discover it, is recorded on the party's roaming sheet. That's sort of like the party's shared sheet. And now anyone can use them to their benefit. And then once you discover a mystery, you discover a new one. So how can you use it? Well, you can gain a bonus D6 advantage. Remember, we talked about how to get to the maximum number of dice you roll, which is 6d6. You might use that truth to an advantage. Or you can gain a free twist once per session. That's under your control. Normally, the twists are under the GM's control. This is under your control, and you can do it once per session. Where does the sun go at night? What do clouds taste like? Why do flowers die in the dark? What secrets lie in silence? When does the moon blink? Are all squirrels red? Why do the leaves fall? Again, it's kind of whimsical and silly. And then we pick a name, and then we're done. And then there's chapter 8, which gets into your airships, aka, this game's version of sailing ships or airships, which is, Pico Titans, where you strap a little howdah to the back of a cat or an otter or a weasel. And then there's GMing section. There's a bestiary, which is properly called a hazard section. A little bit of information about upgrading your howdah. And just like how Wildsea, you could upgrade your ship, you can upgrade your Pico den, which rides on top of your cat or whatever. You could have a kitchen, a workshop, a watchtower, a bar, a storehouse, a garden, a hospital. So there's all sorts of rules for making your cat pimp my cat. And then, of course, we have a GM section, stuff about safety rules, lines and veils, all that other stuff. And in fact, they say, what are the three tones that we need to figure out? How cute are we going to be? How weird are we going to be? And how dangerous are we going to be? And I think those are three great tonal expectations to set. Here we did mention, by the way, that the Picnic lasts 1 to 3 sessions, and the Pic Odyssey could last 10, 20, or even 50 sessions. How to prep, all this other stuff. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that while it may be a very well-written GM section, it probably woefully prepares a GM to run this game. I'm just saying, that's going to be my takeaway. Again, it's a first look. It's not a review because I haven't actually played the game. Here is our hazards section, which again tracks about... Hazards are both monsters, but they're also things that you have to fight. Rules for creating all sorts of different things like fighting a cat. A clanker cat, a comet-nosed mole, a Draco bat. Oh shit, this is like a dragon. A Draco bat. That's awesome. Look at that. Look how nasty that thing is. It's got the huge beastly elite. It's got a massive 12 hearts with three breaks. Very cool. Again, surprisingly more complex than I thought it was. A dire picorana, a drumming bird, etc., etc. So, all sorts of stuff for your bugs, I guess, to go and fight. But it's not just monsters, right? It can also be other hazards and other problems, predatory plants, and I guess it's kind of like a monster. Scumdoos, shroomlings, Zygar, the all-consuming. By the way, check out Zygar, the all-consuming. Immune to everything but giga damage. So he doesn't even take damage unless it's giga damage, which is crazy. So you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points of giga damage to him. Brutal. More advice. And then here is like an atlas of different locations and places to go. Ooh, this is the shadow house that they were talking about before. And then we have an appendix. I can't even imagine. When people say like, Derek, why are you going to make a game? I'm like, I can't even imagine how much. The appendix with character sheets and a rules summary, which we kind of covered pretty well. And stuff about scenes, dealing damage, montages, journeys, how to make a character, Pico Titan stuff, and a list of everybody who backed the Kickstarter. All right. Well, a lot covered there. However, we did benefit from the fact that we had looked at Wildsea before. So none of this was like super, super brand new. So, first looks. Questions. What is this game about? As far as I can tell, it's about being a weird, cute bug and going on adventures as a weird, cute bug. And being kind of a not serious game and making it, fun because you're, a bug. How does the game accomplish that? With, for a weird, cute little game with a surprisingly in-depth framework for modeling the challenges of a game into a framework that all of your skills and all of your aspects can interlock and interlink in. This is a game that you can't just play narratively, and you can't just play it as a game, right? Like, I love, I love D&D and Pathfinder 2, but the truth of the matter is you can play them as not a role-playing game, right? You can play it as a board game. You really can. And there's also role-playing games that you basically, they're not even games, really. It's more of like a storytelling exercise. Fiasco. Fiasco calls itself a role-playing game, but I don't really think it's a role-playing game. This is a game that is both. You know, you have to play with the mechanics and you have to play with the fiction. If you're just ignoring the fiction, you're not playing the game right. If you're just ignoring the game, you're also, in my opinion, not playing the game right. This is a type of game for people who want to engage with mechanics and engage with storytelling at the same time. That is a niche for sure. Now, what doubles up on that niche is you're doing it as a bug in a post-apocalyptic, post-humanity world of weird, quasi-strange bug stuff. Is this the most niche game that we've ever covered on this channel? No. I think. But it is pretty niche. But you know, I think the mechanics are interesting. I get where they're, you know, how they can lead to interesting and fun story elements. I think that when you can tie the fiction back into narrative progress, it's a lot more fun and enjoyable. The framework is obviously very solid. It's basically based off of, you know, Blades in the Dark at some core level. There's a lot of weird bespoke mechanics, but at the end of the day, if you learn how to run this game, everything kind of runs the same. So you only have to learn one system. You just have to learn how to do it well. Now, there's a lot of room in here for GM. Just make it up, GM. Just make it up, GM. That's tough. That's tough. Yeah, like Marcus, you could play this game as weird post-irradiated mutant wasteland, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could tweak this and change this, you know. But now again, Adam, it's not a review. I haven't played the game as you have. But I would not consider this to be much heavier in narrative. That's me personally, just from reading the game. But you know, again, so mostly because again, narrative to me doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as fiction. And ultimately, the reason that we're leaning into the fiction is for the mechanical interface. At the end of the day, you're marking ticks on tracks. You know, that's very gamist. No, there's no you know, way around it. So again, you have far more experience with the game than me, but you know, I don't necessarily see anything here as much that like is kind of just like, oh, just go with the flow and, you know, go to the next beat. It's pretty, you know, engaged with it. So with the mechanics, and I think that's to the game's benefit. So and another way to put it is, Adam, I don't see someone playing this game for an extended period of time and not interfacing with the mechanics, whether that be a track or an aspect or a track or an aspect or a die roll or you know, a journey track or a crafting montage. You know, I think you're going to keep going back to the game elements over and over and over again. I mean, again, I could be wrong, but like that to me speaks to the gamist nature of the game, more than I think maybe some other games would. But again, you know, your experience may vary, and I haven't played the game, so it's hard for me to say otherwise. But it's fascinating. Now, I'm not super into how you gain nectar, because it's basically just like, you know, hey, you know, do cool stuff, and the GM might give it to you, you know. And by the way, shout out, you know, we're here. By the way, I just saw this randomly. Shout out to where was it? I just saw it. Oh, shout out to River Ray in chat. Respect. So again, I think it's a cool variation. I guess what I guess I call it a cool variation of Wildsea. However, as I said with Wildsea, I mean, I thought Wildsea was really cool. Would I rather it just be like, sailing ships and not nearly as weird? Yes. But I'm also not like super as much into like sort of like the weird indie RPG space as many people are. I like my my tropes, and so that's just a personal taste. For some people, they've like, look, I've been a human warrior a million times. Now I want to be a feisty bug or a surly cockroach. All right, man, respect. Here's an RPG where everyone plays an intelligent shade of the color blue. The sky is the limit. But yes, I do think so. Mickey the Pilgrim, I do think that is the case. I'm not as I'm not as clear about this as however we want to do that. But anyways, but for me, it's kind of similar, in that aspect to to Mouse Guard, right? Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely agree with that. Now I'm curious. Have you played like Mouse Guard or Mouse Ritter or any other game where you don't play as a human? Or like what was the other game where you play as little animal creatures? Root. Like what I'm saying is like, are you just basically saying like not playing as a human? So, because I mean, I do think that is definitely part of the sort of appeal. I don't think it's quite so. Apothecaria, sure, that's another one. Yeah, Wander Home. I mean, there's a lot of games where you play as like a small diminutive little thing. Is all I guess what I'm trying to say. I don't know that I find that the bug concept is particularly, stands out as opposed to just any of those other instances. But I definitely think that like putting someone into the idea of the Mouse Guard, which is a game I have much more experience with, obviously, is. It is a fundamental difference because I think people have a resonance. What do they think of when they think of a mouse? They don't think of a great hero. They think of a little mouse. And so when you ask a little mouse to go out on a, dangerous adventure, I think it naturally puts people into a little bit more of a different mindset, But yeah, so I think in that respect, a bug kind of operates on that same principle. Although, ironically, in Mouse Guard, you actually are very frail and vulnerable, and you do die a lot. Whereas, ironically, in Pico, you don't, because I think it says you can always just curl up into a ball, Whereas in Mouse Guard, actually, it is kind of lethal, and the idea is because you're just a mouse, and they want to kind of drive that home. Would this game work if you could mark mood changes when you find your character feeling that way in the fiction? If so, then it's less gamist than I'm assuming. If not, then it's less fiction first. That's a great question. I don't know the exact answer. There was a lot of words about mood that we, kind of skipped over. Let's see here. I don't exactly remember. Let's see here. It says when a bug's mood is affected by their actions or environment. What can change a bug's mood? Quite a lot, but not so much that it happens too many times within a single session. Some bugs gain a positive or negative pull based off of their aspects like parts and gears. A bug with leafy hat is immune to negative pulls from weather. And spending a task on recovery often pulls on your mood in some way. But most of the time, mood pulls are handled by the Weaver. So my answer to that would be, it sounds a little bit more gamist, in that you're not really deciding it in that way. But I mean, to be fair, I mean, I've complained about this at long length and concerns, which is, what you're abstracting away as, as being unique to being a bug, I personally think should apply to being an elf. In a weird way, I think being an elf is a more different experience to what we are than being a bug. At least in the classic, Tolkien-esque approximation of elfdom, right? Immortal, ageless, eternal, bound to the circles of the world, that kind of concept, right? I think that is a more. I actually think that is more of a leap, than being a bug, personally. But unfortunately, as you rightfully point out, right? Most people. Well, but here's the problem, though, Adam. What do most people do when they play an elf? What do most people do when they play a dwarf? What do most people do when they play any race? It's just a fun costume that they wear. My guess is that most people are going to play their bugs like they're people that are just wearing a bug suit. I mean, it'd be cool if it actually fundamentally changed the way that you approach the game and the story and the interaction. But in my experience, most of the time, that is not the case. Maybe for those special few who really get it, it does. But yeah. Yes, race ancestry is just Star Trek costume bumps on the heads. Right, exactly. Oh, they're a totally different race. Why? Oh, they've got bumps here, They're totally just a human, but they have bumps here, But yeah, people think like people, and that's a tough thing to change. Now, this is where things get a little bit Derek dramatic, which is why I like games that force you to play a different way, because and I mean, when I say force you to play, I mean force you to role play, force you to feel, force you mechanically to do things, right? And a lot of people hate that because they think that is the anathema of role playing, whereas I think that is the exact impetus of role playing, right? I like, for I mean, we've talked about this at length, but like in Torchbearer, elves are very much Tolkien-esque elves, and if an elf's nature becomes too strained, or it becomes too elf-like, they will leave, they will leave the campaign. Like, because they're basically they get on a ship and they head to the west, and you're like, no, I don't want to. I'm not. I'm in control of my character. No, you're a human being. Playing an elf like a human being, and the system kind of intersects and says, nah. And by the way, if you think Torchbearer does that, Burning Wheel does that like dialed to 11 with a lot of its races, and a lot of people don't like that, because they feel like that is interfering with role playing. But I feel like that is actually what role playing is. It's not quite the same, but I mean, in some ways it is. But like in the One Ring, which we just started playing, especially if you're playing a longer campaign, everyone can accumulate shadow. Shadow is the burden of how painful emotions are, and elves do not mechanically get rid of shadow well. And it's because they're so long-lived, like, the hurts that hurt them stay. You know, they don't have the ability to just get over it like a human does. And that is mechanically represented by the fact that you cannot get rid of the shadow points very quickly, which means that as an elf character, you are extremely powerful, but you're also kind of like emotionally vulnerable, which is why in the actual novels, elves frequently kind of just give up and they leave. They leave Middle Earth, you know? When you say, aren't you in control of your nature, do you mean like from a torchbearer or burning wheel kind of way? Somewhat. Yeah, you are somewhat. But I will also say that, like, you know, if you like tap your nature and fail, like you might roll shitty and you might bomb your nature and you didn't mean to do that. So, but it's true. It's true. Very neurotypical conversation about what feeling like a human even means. It's a great question. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, this idea that like playing as a different, you know, whatever species or a different concept should change the way that you feel about the game is a cool idea. I'm just saying that historically it doesn't matter. Like, you know, people don't play that way, you know? But oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it just depends on what you're into, you know? The whole bug thing just doesn't, well, not just the bug thing, but also like it is a deliberately cutesy game. Cutesy games aren't really my thing. You know, it's less of my thing, you know. But Marcus says, good role players who understand fantasy can mimic thieves or drunks or obscure types, but most just make their characters dramatic, like Rings of Power. Well, what I've actually found is that, you know, most people just do whatever they want and then excuse it later as good role playing, but, you know, whatever. So anyways, it's just one of those things where it really just depends on what you think the purpose of a role-playing game is. That's another aspect of it, which is for some people, it is about embodying this character. For me, it's more about creating interesting stories with my friends. So I'm less interested in the character anyways. I'm more interested in how does the system create and promote interesting and fun, you know, adventures. You know, basically is what it comes down to. But again, there's different strokes, you know, for different folks. There's a reason why people play Chubos and I don't. But I emote disinterest, you know. And I'm saying that because I want you to be clear that I'm not just thinking that and I'm not just acting like that. I'm actually emoting that. I emote disinterest. Right. Well, that's the problem, right? With RPGs in general. It's such a broad and cumbersome title and definition, and it's changed dramatically. I mean, there are people who are very upset. Where the hell it is? For whatever reason, I swear it's like a conspiracy theory. Anytime I come back here to grab Fiasco, it's always missing. And I feel like it's some conspiracy by the people who were made very mad about Fiasco's performance. But, you know, I mean, Fiasco says it's a role-playing game. And, you know, a lot of people are like, it's not even a game. It's a social activity. And I'm like, well, it beat Draw Steel, so what do you got to say about that? But anyways, it's an interesting game. I don't know. I'll tell you this. I am more likely to play Pico than Eternal. What's it called? Eternal Ruins. Is that the one? This is more interesting to me than Eternal Ruins. I think it's called Eternal Ruin. Eternity Ruins. I don't exactly remember the name of it, but you know, you're a statue that just randomly wakes up in the middle of an endless, expansive stone labyrinth that goes on forever. Go. That. I was like, I have no idea. I have no interest in that, as a premise. But anyways, but I dig the mechanics. You know, I think the Pico mechanics, similar to the Wildsea mechanics, are very cool. Now, I will freely admit that, you know, both Wildsea and Pico have this very weird and interesting premise that may not 100% grab me in certain ways. I think if anything grabs me from both of them, it's that I think that they both really seem to focus or enjoy the idea of journeying, discovery. I think those are very interesting, and I think that's quite a cool part. But I do think both games, just like Blades in the Dark, by the way, really rely on a good game master to make it even remotely playable. And I honestly think that a game like this is hard to game master. And I say that as someone who considers themselves a pretty proficient game master. And I actually think this could be an area sometimes where the lack of resonance can hurt you a little bit, because you're like, I don't know, bug stuff. You know, it's a little bit tough, you know. Whereas I have a lifetime of stuff I can draw upon to do, you know, generic fantasy dungeon world, make something up, you know, or a lifetime spent of like heist movies or you know, crime movies or crime shows to say run Blades in the Dark. Weird bugs in a post Mysterio apocalypse, humanless, deserted world that is both strange and weird and wonderful and cute. For me personally, that is a lot harder, for me to draw upon. Now, maybe other people, you know, that's easier, but for me, you know. So, well, I think you're selling yourself short there. Actually, I mean, you know, either your players are very easy to impress, or maybe you're actually better than you think you are. Because I could tell you, I mean, I've seen people run games like this, you know, and games that are structured around like this, and they struggle bus. I've seen you know, quote unquote professional DMs, you know, people on YouTube and stuff like that, run games like this, like Blades in the Dark and things like that, and struggle bus their way to oblivion. So yeah, I mean, I think you're probably selling yourself short. Lasers and Feelings. What a fun game. But see, as an example of that, Laser and Feelings, I prefer swords and sorcery, right? Which is like it's the same thing as Laser and Feelings. It's just swords and sorcery. Well, you could have run it, but unfortunately you can't make it. So, you know, we won't know. At least not this time. So, I don't know. It's cool. I mean, it's always neat to see these different games, and you know, I could definitely say this, in a world where everything is just a, you know, a 5e clone. I mean, there's games like Pico, right? So, I mean, that alone is a good reason to check it out. Yeah, I mean, but the vibe not hitting doesn't mean it's a bad game. It's just not my thing as much. But I mean, some of the core concepts of the game I think are really cool. I love the way that the mysteries is handled. I think that's probably my favorite mechanic in the game. I love the idea of the player-controlled quantum mystery that then becomes a truth that is established by the player through the process of that advancement. I think that's much more satisfying, and then just, you know, I mean, we play Fab Ultima, but like, you know, Fab Ultima, you can spend a Fabula point, you get 2 to 6 of them a session, and you can spend a Fabula point at any time and just alter the story. It's literally that's actually the ability in the book called Alter Story, and you just kind of say, oh, actually, the crystals work like this. it's cool, but it doesn't feel like you don't really earn it, In this game, it feels like you're earning that. Now, of course, you could, again, you could make it silly and stupid, and depending on how, memey you want the game to be, like your mystery could be, like I said, like how many roads must a man walk down before they, how many roads must a bug walk down before you can call them a bug? That could be your mystery, and it's and you're like the answer, or you're to put it another way, your quest, your question could be like, what is the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything? And you're like, and it's like the first thing is like 42, and you're like, and then you get the other one, and it's like, I don't know, I need a bigger computer, Earth, and then finally, you get to the real answer, and it's like, what do you get when you multiply 6 times 7? And you're like, that's no, see, that's just it. That's the ultimate answer. I said, what is the ultimate question to life, the universe, and everything? Which is, what do you get when you multiply 6 times 7? Figuring out the answer, that's the easy part. That was just a small discovery. But and then you're like, okay, what are we supposed to do with that? And it's like, nothing. I just thought it was funny. That's fine. The answer to life is 6, 7. No. What do you get when you multiply 6 times 7? What? Am I like completely... I don't think so. The answer to the question was wrong, or the question was wrong. There you go. Yeah, no, you're right. I was remembering it 6 times 7. It's 6 times 9. 6 by 9. But the reason that made me think of that was because I said, how many rows must a man walk down? And, when the mice needed the answer, your question, they're like, what is 42? And they're like, well, what's the question? They're like, that was one of the proposals they had, which is, how many rows must a man walk down? And they're like, yeah, that one sounds like a good one. We'll go with that one. But is there a Hitchhiker's Guide to the RPG? I don't think so. It's not your Swedish penis pump, Austin? I'm aware of the scene. I'm just not sure what that has to do with what we're talking about. That's not my bag, baby. Here's a book authored by Austin Powers. Swedish-made penis enlarger pumps and me. This sort of thing is my bag, baby, by Austin Powers. What is your favorite gaming genre, and why is it fantasy? Because of J.R.R. Tolkien and Ursula K. Le Guin. Mostly those two, with a dash of Robert Jordan. Yeah. That though, like I said, I mean, Tolkien and Le Guin are like my foundational pillars of fantasy. Sort of, maybe. I mean, not like. I don't know that I could ever do it justice in a way that I think it deserves. So I have a very horrible, controversial take about Howard, which is I love Conan the Barbarian novels, but I really don't love Robert E. Howard's Conan novels. I prefer the spin-off authors that wrote Conan during like the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s. Like, Leonard Carpenter, L. Sprague de Camp, Robert Jordan. Robert Jordan wrote 4 or 5 Conan novels for Tor Fantasy in the 80s. Yeah, ouch. You know, Howard Conan is from the same time as, like, you know, H.P. Lovecraft, and it was just like this. I don't like H.P. Lovecraft. It's a little too something. I don't know what it is. Yeah, Le Guin has some great sci-fi too. You know, Left Hand of Darkness is really good. I mean, I've pretty much read everything she's ever written, but how dare you? Don't ever talk to me or my hardback special editions ever again. Yeah, I mean, look, I have, you know, I don't have like, I have like omnibuses versions. I've read them. They're okay, you know. But they're not my favorite, you know. My favorite thing that Robert E. Howard wrote, what is it? Is his introduction. He wrote a poem, and it's the poem is called Samaria, right? Which is, I think, when he first envisioned, you know, Middle Earth, or not Middle Earth, Hyboria, and he writes the poem, and it ends with his signing off, and it says, suggested by the memory of the hill country above Fredericksburg, as seen in a mist of winter rain. That line is great. Suggested by the memory of the hill country above Fredericksburg, as seen in a mist of winter rain. That is evocative to me, you know? That's pretty good. Yeah, so I have a very conflicted nature with the 2D20 games. I played 2D20 Conan, and it was shit. I didn't like it. I played in a Star Trek game. It was okay. And I own every Dune 2D20 book. But there's something about it that I don't know. I don't know what it is. There's something about it. It's missing. I don't know what it is. Fundamentally, I do like them, but you're glad. You gotta go. I'll figure out how to run Pico online for the night. Thanks you for doing the first look. Glad you liked it, and I'm glad it's your favorite game now. I mean, you know, like, there's a lot of great tech here, and Felix Isaacs is a fantastic game designer. You know, I'm excited that they're doing what they're doing, and I think it's cool that they're, you know, building on this engine but doing it differently each time. And I think it's a really cool approach. And of course, I love Blades in the Dark, and ultimately, I feel like this is sort of a spiritual successor to Blades in the Dark, and so I think that makes it really, really cool. But thank you for supporting this, and thank you for supporting the patron, and thank you for your first look. Well, I'm glad we finally got to it. It's been a while coming. Black Company's okay. It's a little too grim and, you know, realistic for me. In that respect. 2D12, the era of 2D12 is just better. I do prefer 2D12 to 2D20, I'll say that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of meta currency. The problem with 2D20 Conan is I just think that, like, people, you know, like, if I'm going to play Conan the Barbarian, like, I'm just going to play, like, Barbarians Lemuria or something like that, you know, or even, like, Dungeon World or something like that. Yeah, grimdark fantasy. Yeah, that sounds right. It's a little, like I said, it's a little grim. It's a little dark. But Cook's Black Company is really cool. And I mean, again, one of the games I've always wanted to play, never ran it, is this game. And this game is quite literally based off of those novels, more or less. I mean, that this is Black Company in game form, kind of, sort of. Hey, what's up, McNancy? But I've never actually run this, but it's awesome. Yeah, you're calling it a white whale is a good way to describe it. Yeah. Um. Oh, cool, Jake. Yeah, Barbarians of Lemuria is great. It's simple. It's easy. Um. It's fun. It's quick. It's yeah. It's good. I actually like it a lot. It's one of my favorite rules light system that I don't get. I didn't they do. I think they did a second edition. I don't own the second edition, and I don't know if they really like changed a lot of the rules. I don't even know where my Barbarians of Lemuria is. Too many games back here, but it is really good. Yeah, yeah. Like so, for example, whatever 2 years ago now or whatever 30, Knights of Last Call, particularly Bob, became really enamored with Dragonbane, and Dragonbane's great. It's great, but Mirth and Mayhem, beer and pretzels type game, and that's great. But for me, I would rather play Barbarians of Lemuria than Dragonbane. That's just me personally. Oh, see, I'm way behind. I think I own the first edition. I don't know if I've ever played or run anything other than the first edition. I was trying to find it so I could see what edition it is, but I'm pretty sure it's the first edition. Anyways, it's older. Yeah, there's another property I don't care about. I don't care about Elric. I'm sorry. I read it. I read at least a couple of them. I never got into Moorcock. Sorry, I just didn't. I know I'm a horrible person, but there's some pillars of the fantasy. I love Tolkien. I love Le Guin. I don't love Howard. I don't love Moorcock. Just don't. I don't. The Eternal Champion is like he's too emo. He's too moody, I mean, it's a classic. It is a classic. I can't deny that. But he's like, I just don't like anti-heroes. It's why I don't like Wolverine. I don't like Wolverine. I don't like Wolverine. I don't like Wolverine. I don't like anti-heroes. I don't like, see the emo is why I like emo music, but I don't like emo characters. All right. It's almost 11. No clue. No clue. It's because as I understand it, it's because Michael Moorcock, who's still alive, apparently his license was like locked up or something, and recently it got released to him or something, or whatever. Now he has full control of it, and I guess he wants to make a lot of money before he dies, and or like leave a lot of money to his next of kin, and so he is just whoring out his license to anybody and everyone. Is how that's how I'm reading it, because there's actually 2 Elric games coming out actually. So yeah. Again, listen. Musical tastes aside, musical tastes are not the same thing as gaming tastes, or reading tastes, I don't like Batman either. Late night stream later. No, I'm so tired, Cineboss. I'm so tired. Right, I don't like Wolverine and I don't like Batman. I mean, it's all, there's, tortured past, turning my pain into vengeance. I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. Not interested. Don't know. Yes, I'm a Cyclops man. I love Cyclops. I mean, I don't only love Cyclops, but Cyclops is great. I think Cyclops is amazing. Thanks, Shinobi. I also love the First Wheel of Time books as well. I mean, because Jordan didn't know if he was going to get picked up for the whole thing, and yeah, basically it's Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I called it even on comic books. It's too much for me to. They can just do their thing. It's fine. Well, more than likely, we're going to be continuing to do. We're going to probably go back to Stone Top. Although, no, actually, no, I forgot. Sanjeev dropped some money. We are going to be looking at the wheel that burns, the rim, the hub, the spokes, burning wheel gold, but also stonier. And we can talk about fate and persona and Artha and deeds and persona point complications and MVPs and life paths and misery and disposition and duels and range and volley and range and cover, duel of wits and circles and infinite pages upon infinite pages. Well, the thing about Torchbearer is it's kind of hard to call it Luke Crane's magnum opus when like Tor Ulvsrud was like really the designer, you know. I mean, if you want to know what Luke Crane's real magnum opus is, technically with Jared Sorensen, but it's right here. Free market. You want to nothing, and I mean nothing, that we have covered on this channel is as weird as free market. There is a non-zero chance I bring this to NightCon and I play it with a group of people. And again, not only is this the weirdest game of all time, this might be one of the more rare. This might be one of the rarest products in ever. I think they, like I said, I think even Jared Sorensen himself came into our stream and told us, I think that they made less than, or maybe they made 1,000 box copies of this and never made it again. So. Even the product is a meta product, by the way. Like, in this game, everything is described by 3 tags. When you make something, everything has 3 tags, and there's a character. Oh, no, shit. There's a. Oh, no, there we go. All these buttons. Like when you create an item, when you create something, you write down. It's 3 tags right here. So you create an item and then you give it 3 tags. But like the rule book, this is the rule book, by the way, for free market. The rule book has on the back of it, free market instruction manual, ephemera, rule book, colorful. Those are the 3 tags for the free market rule book. So like the rule book itself is referenced by the rules of the game. Oh. I'm not going to lie, Cineboss. I don't know that I would be willing to play this game with anyone other than a group of diehard, seasoned KOLC veterans, because they're the only type of gamers who have, the kind of exposure to complete and total weirdness that might even be remotely possible for someone to enjoy free market. Well, I heard it's going to bomb horribly bad and they're going to lose millions of dollars on it, but I mean, what else is new, but I will say I am a fan of the original Masters of the Universe movie with Dolph Lundgren and oh goodness, what's his name? I want to say like Peter Langley, but that's not his name. Who plays Skeletor? Not Peter O'Toole. It's Jesus, it's like a reasonably famous, serious actor who played Skeletor. what was his name? Frank Langella. That's it. For my money, yeah, for my money, the epic villain monologue that Frank Langella gives, as he is becoming God Skeletor at the end of that movie, is like a 10 out of 10. And then when He-Man breaks free and he gets to, his sword and he draws it and him and Skeletor face off. It is one of the greatest showdowns of all time. The only thing that is unfortunate about that movie, it is my understanding that Dolph Lundgren was told that his accent was too strong and that they were just going to dub over all of his lines with ADR. And so in a lot of those scenes, he kind of doesn't really give a lot of oomph to his scene, to his expressions, because he didn't, it was just filler because they were just going to ADR it. And of course they ended up using his dialogue. And so, he kind of he pales in comparison to how much scene chewing Skeletor does in that final scene. But there's that just that fantastic epic final confrontation between Skeletor and He-Man, and it even ends with one of our favorite quotes, which from Conan the Barbarian, right? Or actually, technically, Conan the Destroyer, which is "Enough talk," and then they fight. Of course, that's obviously from Conan the Destroyer, where the two wizards are, the bad guys and the good guys are parlaying, and Conan gets tired of the conversation and he goes, "Enough talk," and he whips out a dagger and throws it and hits the guy in the chest and kills him. Oh, so good. Not enough of that in RPGs. That needs to be a feat, right? Enough talk. Like when the GM and another player are role playing too much and you're just bored with it, you're like, "Enough talk," and you just whip a dagger, kill somebody, and go to initiative. All right. That's going to do it for me tonight. I am luckily not streaming tomorrow. I need to finalize one or two more things for NightCon, and then I actually need to figure out, what I'm bringing, what I'm going to run, and what I'm actually doing. Sign up for a couple of games, see what's still available. Let me take a look here real quick before I head out. Wizards is good. I do like and seen Wizards. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. Movie I think is also underrated. Sword and the Sorcerer, campy 80s movie. That one's pretty good. Dragon Slayer, Peter Nichols, also very good. Let's see here. Let's see what's got some slots open. Let's see. Board game. Okay. Somebody's running Daggerheart. Clobster's running Daggerheart. That's got an open slot. Let's see. Dr. Dehart has one slot left for Rapscallion. Eat the Reich. That one seems interesting. A Savage Worlds game. Another Daggerheart game. Ooh, who wants to run Apocalypse Keys? Oh, Dr. Dehart. Dr. Dehart, man, no one's really signed up for his games, but man, these seem like they're really good. Maybe he added them late after people filled out their. Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. We'll have to take a look. But Tigger is running Savage Worlds. I could maybe play some Savage Worlds here. Jess Redicop is running a Pathfinder 2 game. If I can, I'll join that. I'd love to run with Jess. That'd be fun. At least a couple games there. Anyways, should be good. A lot of cool stuff going on. Crazy list of games that are being run. It's pretty awesome. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me. Of course, always, if you want to support us, please check us out, patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. A shout out to Trekkie, Scotty, to Adam, Bo, for supporting this channel. Sanjeev for the amazing support for another Burning Wheel first look. Love to see it. Thank you, Mickey, for the tip. Thank you for the gifted sub, Agile Monk. And, thank you so much for supporting my keyboard, Jake. I appreciate you. That is going to do it for me. I hope to see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody.